Mr. Snow, you are all set. Have a good meeting.
Thank you, Seth. You too. Okay. So we have a quorum. So I'm going to welcome you to the August 7th Scituate Conservation meeting. I'll read a couple of quick things here. This meeting is being held remotely as an alternate means of public access pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, temporarily amending certain provisions of the open meeting law. You're hereby advised that this meeting and all communications during this meeting may be recorded by the town of Scituate in accordance with the open meeting law. Second piece is the town of Scituate's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. The Scituate Conservation Commission is committed to providing an environment of respect during our meetings. We ask all members to interact in a polite manner, even when there is disagreement. We value the participation of our community and want all participants, including marginalized and minoritized communities, to feel welcome and respected. We ask our committee members and all who participate to commit to these standards and to support and respect our community. So that's two opening pieces. We have an agenda this evening. If we have time at the end of the meeting, I would like to add a little bit of update on some little bit of issues at the Appleton field, as well as discussing how we move forward with that, and maybe a little bit of maintenance to the fields, but we'll see how late the meeting goes. It is a fairly filled meeting, so we want to try to keep this moving along as quickly as possible.
Okay.
Can I get a motion for the agenda, please?
I make a motion to accept the agenda as written with the add-ons Frank just mentioned.
And a second?
Second, Andy.
From Andy. All in favor? Doug?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
And Frank, yes. And so we don't have Rich and Brendan.
No.
All right. So we're going to open with 196 Edward Foster Road. This is Grady Engineering. For a couple of you that weren't aware, we did have an on-site just to view the location of where that proposed walkway and dock would be constructed. We met last Friday at a minus tide, and the owner and their attorney, engineers, and pile driver were present. And for the commission, it was Amy, Jen Smith, Jen Foley, Penny, and myself, and Maura Curran from the select board. So we just had a chance to take a look at the stakes that were driven. I know Richard had a chance to take a look at that location, but it was an informational thing. It wasn't a debate sort of discussion. So maybe we'll open this back up to Amy. Do you have anything you want to say before Grady?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I do. Okay, so it's a continued public hearing. So we're just going to pick up where we left off, because we had a thorough presentation from the Grady team. And at the end of the public hearing, there were a few things that you decided that you wanted to do before closing the hearing, but we heard many concerns and people for, people against the abutters concerns. And so today we're just going to pick up where we left off. And so that is just basically a summary of what's been done since the last hearing. So any new information that was generated, just a review of the site inspection and what the outcome of that was, which is basically the stakes were set and we viewed the stakes so you could visualize where the dock is actually going to be in the water. And then if there are any concerns that have not already been brought up, we can take those, but as you can see, this is a really packed agenda, and so we're not looking to re-debate and rehear things that we've already been over. So I hope that that's clear to everybody.
That's great. And I'll reinforce that we don't need to hear about past concerns. I think we're trying to work through them, but we want to kind of get to the issues that were out there, and if hopefully Grady can fill us in on that, and then or whatever is on for the applicant, and then we'll move it along. Thanks. So we have somebody from representing 196.
I unmuted Scott, Matt, and Joe Harold.
Okay.
So it's Matt Mitchell on behalf of Joe Harold, the applicant from Orenberger, DeLisi and Harris. I'm just going to introduce everybody and then step out of the way. Rick Grady and Scott Fenara from Grady Consulting are here, and Paul Armstrong from South Shore Pile Driving, I believe, is also on the line. And with that, I'll just turn it over to Rick to see if there's any questions he can answer for you.
Thank you.
Actually, Scott is going to take it from here. Just make sure I'm unmuted here and give you an overview. We really don't have any plan changes since the last meeting. So I'll let Scott take it from here.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, like Amy said, we'll try to keep this brief. There were some comments at the last hearing. One of them was from DMF. DMF had sent a response letter. We'd addressed that about a month ago. We also met out on site where we staked the proposed float and the proposed dock, and we met on site to view it. As Rick stated, there really aren't any changes to the plan. So we're really just here to answer any questions you guys have.
Okay. Let's see. Actually, well, why don't we just start with Doug? Or Amy, do you want to add anything more before we go into members?
I don't think I have anything in addition to what I said last hearing. It was good to learn more about how they're going to, install the piers. Sounds like it's going to be mostly a land approach. And so, this is a pretty straightforward dock, similar to docks that we condition in the South River. And the bulk of the review is really stands with the Chapter 91 license, the Waterways Department of the DEP.
So why don't we, well, we'll go to members next. Doug, do you have any questions, comments?
Yeah, just one nerdy land surveyor question. But it's a little relevant because I think it might cause some confusion. But on the plan, and I think I might have just maybe briefly mentioned it last time, but you show a 26.2 tie to what you're calling a lot line extension. And that's the edge of, that would be a prolonged edge of that right of way of Edward Foster Road, correct?
Yes, that'd be a projection. Sorry, Scott.
So did you just do that somewhat for a placement or effect, or did you actually go through the effort to, I guess my question is, are you implying that right of way continues that way? Or did you just, is that just a convenient tie line, or did you actually go through the effort of trying to prorate all the ownership lines out into the Commonwealth if that were to occur? Because, well, yeah, that's the question.
Right. So the right of way does not extend below the water line. It is a projection of the right of way. DEP Waterways has a requirement that we're 25 feet from the nearest abutting owner. So it is a projection of the nearest abutting owner, primarily for waterways.
Okay, but you're not implying that that's the actual ownership line.
Correct. It's definitely not. It would be tied lands of the Commonwealth for ownership right there.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure that's what your intention was. So that's the last of my question. Thanks.
Okay. Penny?
I really don't have any question. I thought the site visit was great. It answered my concerns about the float, the dock going out, the length of it and everything, and they did a really good job of staking it out. And I feel very comfortable with it. Thank you.
Okay. Jen Foley?
I appreciate Doug's question because it would have I would have asked something incoherent, but trying to get to a similar point. And if the answer is like there is no right of way in that, because we did see something from one of the abutters that made it seem as though the float and potential boat would be in the right of way, but if that's not the case, then I'm all set.
Okay. Andy?
Yeah, so the float's been mentioned. I know some of the initial feedback from DMF was that the float was too large and it should be reduced. Has it been reduced?
Yes.
No, the float size has not been reduced. We determined that this is really the smallest float size to be able to suit his needs, the boats that he has.
Because the current boat is too large.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, that's the one hang up that I still have that we raised from the beginning. I feel like we should size the float appropriately and find a boat for the appropriate float, not find a big boat and then build a too big float for the area that has a negative impact on the environment. So I guess I'm still hung up there. I guess I'll see what the rest of the commission thinks, but I'd love to see that the float reduced to the suggested size.
Andy, do you remember or does anybody remember what the suggested size was? Thanks for bringing that back up.
So DMF did not suggest a specific size. They asked if it should be reduced to accommodate, basically minimize the size appropriate for the boat. He's proposing a 28-foot center console here. The float's 10 by 20. It's not extremely large. We do need to allow some room for the ramp to move on that float as well. So that uses approximately 4 to 5 feet on the float itself. So the effective length of it is really about 15 feet when you get down to the bottom of that ramp during a high tide.
Frank,
Okay.
Frank.
Yes, Penny?
I just thought of one question that I did want to ask. And that is that the float and the ramp down will be removed in the winter?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
So Amy, it's DMF, is that a advisory or is it regulatory? How does that work?
We lost her.
No, sorry, had myself muted. Sorry about that. Yeah, so they're one of the agencies, they're state agencies that are allowed to comment on these projects. So while they're not a permitting authority, they do weigh in on their opinions. So I guess they're a regulating agency as opposed to a permitting authority in this instance.
And I'm trying to remember why their comments, why they felt it should be smaller. Was there?
So they're looking out to be protective of fish and wildlife. So, that's what they were bringing up, like width of boards and stuff like that, so as to like not shade organisms in the ground and the habitat and the, fish, wildlife, eelgrass, that type of thing. So there's certain specs that they look for,
Okay,
depending on the site itself, and what's actually there.
And to answer your question, Frank, the area advisory primarily to DEP waterways. So they will comment to conservation as well, and they'll submit similar comments to waterways as well.
okay. Thank you. We don't have Brendan. I guess I want to open this up to the public.
Right, so if you have something new that you haven't said before, you can raise your hand. We'll try to keep the comments quick. Heather has raised her hand first. I'm gonna unmute her.
And anybody that's on, we would like you to state your name and address, please.
Yep, so this is Heather.
Hello, this is Heather Jenkins from 22 Sunset Road, Scituate, Massachusetts. So has anybody talked to the Army Corps of Engineers? Because I believe this dock is in the purview of their jetty, and that the jetty could very well, based on high velocity zone research, could impact the jetty fairly harshly. So I think that I feel like they really should talk before they even put before this committee. So I'm a little confused why it hasn't happened or hasn't been suggested that it's happened.
We are required to submit to Army Corps. However, we can't submit to them until we get conservation approval first. The sequence of events is that we have to go to the Conservation Commission first, and then we go to DEP Waterways and Army Corps.
This is not a one-step permit, Heather. This is a organizational process. Docs aren't just under our commission. We try to look at the elements that we feel would affect the environment in our areas, and then there's other entities that will review other aspects of this structure as well. Does that make sense?
She has her hand raised again. I think she probably muted herself.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
sorry. No, I think you misinterpreted what I was asking. I'm not asking about you submitting to the Army Corps of Engineers. I'm asking about whether you reference them or talk to them about it when designing the dock itself, because that they have research and information that isn't widely available in regards to high velocity zone structures versus like the run-of-the-mill docks that you would have in the Inner Harbor or in the South River or North River. These rivers have a very standard research, much more research back behind them, what they need to do. Much of the proposal that was put forth has remedies for those habitats, but they don't reference anything that would be needed to be done for high velocity zone areas. So I don't think that the proposal itself really has anything that could mitigate that type of issue. Most projects would have to, have the thing where if they are protected from high winds, high waves, that spot doesn't. So I'm confused about why they don't mitigate that in their proposal at all.
Well, I think, and I'm not an expert on how the Army Corps does this. We've had dealings with them with jetties and things like that. They seem to follow a kind of a rigid guideline. So if their input comes after something else, we'll typically get a letter or whatnot back from them. Basically, they'll review this project when it's their turn. So you come before the commission, then it moves on to the state and other agencies. I could be a little bit off on that, but it's part of the review process for a doc. Do we have any?
Yeah, so sorry. I think, once again, this isn't about the actual procedure of putting it in place. I'm
All
not.
right, so I get your
I'm-
point. You're asking whether the applicant went to the Army Corps first. Their
No.
answer,
I'm asking whether you guys have talked to them or anybody has talked to them about it, because I'm not sure where they're getting the information where this is going to be okay. This is
this project will go, again, this project will go in front of the Army Corps of Engineers as part of the review process.
But it's not, but it's also, it concerns the whole town. That spot you talk about a butters, but the entire harbor is a butter to that spot because it is part of the integral design of the harbor. It's why it's a safe harbor of refuge. And it's on the committee to protect town like incentives like this. So I think that, like, I just want to know, have you guys talked to them? Have you
No.
about it?
The commission has not talked to the Army Corps of Engineers specifically on this project, no.
Have you
and-
talked to anybody on that type of project where it involves by a pre-existing structure that is in a high velocity zone that is entirely to the protection of an area?
I think again, the commission has certain purview to this. And then this will be passed to other agencies that also look at these projects. I understand your concerns, this project and the velocity area that's in. Some of this is on the applicant to make sure that their project is secure. But this will go through a series of agencies to review this. I'm not a structural engineer.
But this is part of the agency, that this is part of the procedure. And I think that you guys should be really considering whether this is in the best interest of the town.
Okay.
Can I? Frank,
Yes, Penny.
can I just say one thing that, Heather, even if we approve this project, if the Army Corps of Engineers says, they're going to, that's what it will be. We are a step in the process. And if the other agencies don't want this or have a reason that it shouldn't be, then it won't be. But we're like the bottom step. And we kind of depend upon them to do their part down the line.
Okay, Heather, this is it.
Amy, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So depending on how the commission goes, but when we condition other docks, does part of our orders of conditions say
Of
subject
course.
to approval
Yes.
of X, Y, and Z? So
Yes,
in
so
our,
all of our orders are to have a statement. It's just, this is what, this is orders pursuant to what we are reviewing it under, Wetlands Protection Act, Scituate bylaw. But they does not relieve the property owner applicant of the requirement to comply with the Army Corps of Engineer, DEP, and Chapter 91 requirements. So those are separate reviews that happen after the notice of intent. And so, they're going to be looking at it from a different point of view. But this, as you say, this is one step along the way. So I think we've beaten this one down.
okay. Is there another question? Anybody else? I see
Yes, here's Elizabeth. I'm gonna unmute Elizabeth. You're on, Elizabeth.
Okay, hi, so sorry, I couldn't get off on mute, sorry. Can you
Yeah.
hear me?
We
Okay,
can.
Terrific.
I'm looking at the document.
Can you
and,
just give
this-
us your name and address, please?
So sorry. Elizabeth Petit, 169 Edward Foster Road.
Thank you.
Thank you. So it wasn't clear to me how tall this is going to be at the end of the dock, right before the ramp goes down to the float.
Scott, can you
Like
give
how
us a,
tall from- I can't read the document. I can't read the numbers.
Sure. So the top of the pier is proposed at about 10 feet, 9.8. So where the ramp is closest to the house, that's right at elevation 10. So we're designed to just walk right into it.
Yep.
Was your question at the front or at the rear?
Yeah, I'm talking about, and that's including the railing.
No, the railing will be an additional, I believe, 3 feet.
Okay, and what I was really referring to was at the very end of the dock, at the end closest to the water, where you have a ramp going down steeply to the float. How tall is that basically from the ground up?
So at the end of the ramp, or at the end of the pier there, the height of it really depends on the ocean level. So at mean high water elevation is 4 feet, so it's about 6 feet of reveal. At mean low water, it's -5, so it's about 15 feet.
So I'm so sorry, to be clear, just for a person who doesn't get all that, 15 feet from the sand to the top of the rail, right before you go down the ramp, is that
I-
correct?
I think it's 15 feet from the sand to the top of the walkway, isn't it, Scott?
To the deck, yes.
To the
So
deck.
to be clear, that's another 3 feet on top of that, is that correct? Or does the railing need to be higher? Because that's pretty high off the ground.
42 inches.
Yeah, I believe the railing will be about 3 feet.
Okay. All right. And then it's not clear, are you going to have a gate? Is there going to be some kind of signage on this? Is it going to be lit? Because I was also thinking of light pollution, and that has an effect on wildlife as well.
There will be signs, and that's required by the harbor master.
Mhm.
Joe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe we have any lights proposed.
No, we don't have any lights proposed.
Oh.
Was that the question?
Yes, if it's going to be lit up at night, like if there'll be spotlights on it, and how is it going to be secured? Do you have a locked gate? Because, kids are going to want to climb up on that when it's high tide and jump off.
Oh,
into the
yeah.
water.
The plan would be to have a lock gate on it.
Mhm.
And like Scott mentioned, there's signage required by the harbor master with the address on the pier and on the float to identify in case it breaks away.
Right, okay, I had heard that. And I just wanted to give some thought to, because something that I'm thinking about is, would the commission be looking at this differently if this was, say, a multiple dock situation around the harbor? Because my concern is that if this dock goes in, that will trigger docks all around the harbor, and that would certainly kick off a great environmental impact. Has thought been given to that?
What we try to act on is what we have for rules and regulations, and certainly understand your concerns that someone else could look at this and say, gee, why can't I have one of those? And it's not, that in my opinion is not a reason to permit or not condition or not a project. Different circumstances occur at different people's properties. Some properties don't extend further than their seawall or whatever. So there's different, we've had the same thing happen and on marshes and things like that. Where do people own to? Where are they permitted? If folks feel that this is something they don't want to perpetuate around the harbor, that would be a bylaw or something the town would have to consider. But what we
Right.
try to do as a commission is act on the rules and regulations that are before us.
Right, but also bearing in mind that
I think part of your purview is to plan ahead and protect our resources in the town. And I kind of had looked at a map of the harbor, and there would be potentially 52 properties that could put out a pier such as this, because I looked on the maps, and they have property down to the low tide mark. So that would be 52 potential. And it's concerning that we don't have anything protecting the harbor in place already from something like that.
We've had these discussions as well when they're on a marsh or in different areas in trying to determine what's the better environmental concern.
Right. And so
We had places where people, this is a place where it's more of a cobble area, but people putting a boat in, mooring it, having another boat, or walking across a marsh. You know, we talk about some of these things as to what seems to be the appropriate mechanism for someone to use that. And in the harbor, obviously, a number of people want to keep their boats, and they have them on docks or piers off. A lot of them are multiple ones, municipal and otherwise. And there's always a debate over how many there should be or what size they should be.
Right,
so-
but those would be available to the public. That would be a public benefit, because more than one private user can use them. And I just want to mention, and I know it was mentioned.
Well, just before you jump, before you,
The marsh is not the harbor. The marsh
Okay.
is not the harbor. So it's a different environment.
well, there's all kinds of docks and piers in the harbor, and some of them are municipal, some of them are clubs, some of them are private. There's a multitude of those pieces. Again, we try to look at what does the town allow, and then are they building it in accordance with those regulations?
Right. Going back to the potential number of piers being built in the harbor, do you think it would be prudent to take this to the town before initiating a private pier very close to the breakwater and potentially around the harbor, so that we may set a policy before we start to do it one by one, kind of scattershot?
I believe that this project has gone to the harbor master, that he's one of the first ones to look at this. And then we look also to see if there's any other issues with easements or anything like that. But we don't take our projects. Actually, one of the select persons was at the meeting or at the site visit to take a look at that. But this Conservation Commission is the board, the commission that reviews these applications. So we wouldn't take an application and say, go to town meeting with that application. If someone wants to have an article or a bylaw or something, there's a process to do that. But we wouldn't be taking applications. I mean, we've had a number of applications for large projects, and we've had to work through those projects as a commission, sometimes with planning, depending on the type of project. But
Right.
we're
All right.
trying to follow the processes, if you will.
Understood. Last question. Again, going back to the purview of the Conservation Commission, more than just the nuts and bolts of building this pier and dock and ramps, are you giving consideration to access to the jetty and access for people to enjoy the waterfront all around the harbor, particularly in that nice section right at the end of Edward Foster Road? I was down there just yesterday. There were paddle boaters, kayakers, fishermen in the water and on the jetty. And I am concerned that a pier would diminish people's enjoyment, restrict their enjoyment, and in fact inhibit their enjoyment. I know I've seen where the stakes are, and I question if there's a pier that goes as far landward as these ramps go, that people will feel like, oh, I can't go there. That's not for me. And that's not right.
Okay.
So I didn't know if consideration was being given to that.
So one of the things that comes up with these is there's a fish and fowl regulation with access to be able to move back and forth by this pier. Scott, has that been addressed?
So the waterways requirement,
Go ahead, Scott.
I'm sorry, Rick.
Yeah,
Oh,
go ahead.
Rick,
So the waterways requirement is that there needs to be a minimum clearance of 5 feet, and that's measured from the ground to the bottom of the lower stringer. It's proposed at mean high water to allow for public access. So essentially, if you're not able to provide the access underneath it, then you have to build up a ramp to go over. But in this situation, there is enough clearance underneath it, so we will not be preventing public access.
I think that people will be inhibited because they don't want to walk underneath a pier to get to nature that belongs to everybody. But I think that's the end of my questions. Thank you.
okay, thank you. There was a question that came up, I think it was in a letter that was submitted about the location of low water and how those levels are determined. It was a letter from Mr. McLeod. I can't put my hand on it. Doug, maybe you can help me with that.
The mean
The
high
mean-
water and mean low water line are going to be determined by an elevation and
Right.
and then surveyed by topography. So
And that's how those were determined, Scott?
Yes, that's correct.
I'm sorry, Doug, did you want to say more to that?
nope, that I was just going to finish. I said I was going to assume that's what they had done.
Okay. All right. Do we have anybody else? We have a couple more hands up.
Okay, there's Stephen Hartlob. I'm gonna unmute.
Yes,
Stephen,
hello. Yes, can you hear me?
We got you.
Hi, so Steve Hartlob, 16 Sunset Road. Just two quick questions. One, I think adds on to Elizabeth's question about the height of the pier as it extends out. And I'm wondering, just from a visual standpoint, for the builders, what is the height of the pier and the railing relative to the height of the jetty?
So the jetty is at an elevation of 8.3, and this deck, the pier, is proposed at 9.8, so 1.6 feet higher.
Okay. So if someone is on the jetty, they would actually be looking up at the pier as they look to the west. Is that what as I understand it?
I mean, I guess if you were standing on the jetty, you might be looking down on it, but so the elevation I gave you was to the top of the jetty.
Understood.
Average 5 or 6 foot person wouldn't be looking
Okay.
up at it.
Okay, thank you. And secondly, at the last meeting, there was a question about jetty maintenance. And I mean, we've lived here for over 30 years, and I've seen the work on the jetty during that time. And I believe the response at the last meeting was that, well, it'll all be handled from the water. And I know that barges are involved, but I believe also that there are some land-based vehicles or heavy machinery that get up there on the jetty to help do the maintenance. So if that's the case, are they going to be able to access the jetty to do that work? I'm not convinced that it can all be done by barges with cranes.
Yes, the dock is placed approximately 40 feet off of the jetty, so there is space that equipment could pass through between the dock and the jetty.
On water, but I'm wondering, is there land access to the base of the jetty?
That would be on land. There's a portion of the pier that is parallel to the jetty, and the space between the new structure and the jetty is approximately 40 feet on land.
Okay, so,
I think
Uh,
the question was more, should the jetty need work, repairs or whatever, and the equipment was, say, brought down Edward Foster Road, can that equipment access the jetty in that fashion, or how would that be dealt with? I think I asked that question before, if there was any sort of easement or anything already in place for that jetty to be accessed from Edward Foster Road, and I believe the answer was no.
So they could still
that
access
is my
it.
question. Thank you.
Yeah, there's two places they could access it. They could access it from basically the beach area and pass below the structure, or they could coordinate with Mr. Harold, who would be more than willing to have them go in there on his property to get to any repairs that they need to make. He would be the first person looking to have those repairs done if they were needed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? So do we have Lisa Fenton?
Now, are
This
we
is
allowed,
on.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I'm allowed to unmute? It's actually Mark Fenton using Lisa's machine with
There you
apologies.
go.
Mark Fenton, 25 Crescent Avenue. And I'm not an immediate abutter, to be clear, but I am a frequent user of the water in the area here. And also, frankly, a past member of the Planning Commission. So I understand fully the challenge that's before you as a board, the difficulty of trying to deal with sort of a lot of emotional response to this kind of an application, which we routinely had to do on Planning Commission. But also to adhere to your requirements by the law, and you know, sort of when we look back at the enabling legislation for bodies like the Planning Commission, Conservation Commission, to foremost place the health, safety, and welfare of the community at the forefront of your minds. And with that in mind, I'm going to just offer public, you know, my testimony that I'd like to be part of the public record, which is, I think there are as many as 3 grounds upon which you should at least be withholding approval now, if not outright denying. And I think it fundamentally comes down to some of the things that have been talked about, but have not been, you know, sort of, I don't think, addressed by the applicant. One is this question of impediment to access to the breakwater, both whether for maintenance and for public access to the breakwater. I know that the sort of that minimum requirement that the 5-foot clearance above mean high tide is ostensibly being met by this. I think in a time when we all know sea level rise is imminent and in fact happening before our very eyes, that is not sufficient, number one. And number two, it won't be a lasting access. And to the point made earlier, I think the impediment to the average person is significant as far as access to the breakwater. That's number one. Number two, I've heard no discussion around the flows. I thought it was brought up in the last meeting. There is essentially a large eddy that forms during the rising tide as water flows into the harbor mouth and circulates in the area right exactly where the proposed infrastructure will be. Those are not insignificant flows. As I read the application, it was simply stated out of hand, there was no impact on flow based on the number of piers and so on. I would at least want to see some evidence of an analysis that confirms that there is not going to be impact. This is a very low slope area. It's an active, you know, from a marine life standpoint, it's a very active area. Changing those flows would have a great deal to do with both sedimentation and removal of sediment, and could affect life in that area. That is certainly well within the purview of the Conservation Commission, and I think should be a concern. And again, I've not seen any analysis other than a statement that these piers would not affect that. I find that very difficult, and I believe the board should ask for more information on that at very least, given the amount of, and most of us are familiar with that kind of flow. You can actually see it during tidal rise and drop and so on in there. The third is the public hazard. So allow a moment of personal insight here. I'm a surfer. We surf inside the harbor during the large storm events. Enough water movement comes through the mouth of the harbor and over this break wall so that we can surf over by the former Coast Guard station, now the NOAA Stellwagen facility, which by the way has a pier, which though several hundred yards further in the harbor, inside the harbor, is substantially more structurally sound than the proposed pier. So let me say this again. A pier, which is several hundred yards inside the harbor mouth, is subjected to enough flow that they have chosen to make a substantially more structural pier there. And there are large enough waves breaking there that we can surf on them inside at that point. I want to be crystal clear. We are not surfing over at the breakwater because the waves there are much too large and violent breaking over the breakwater. So during major storm events, which historically, I will admit, 27 years ago when I moved here and began surfing in this area, I considered those to be occasional, like decadal storms. They are now happening multiple times per year. To be crystal clear, the kinds of storm events that we might have thought as 100-year storm events or decadal storm events are much more frequent. The high velocity water movement over that break wall is mind-boggling during these storm events and can last literally a couple of days during a sustained nor'easter. I think this is all stuff that everybody on this conversation knows, but I wanted to state all of this as a part of the public record because I believe it is and the very fact, by the way, let me add to this, the very fact that the harbor master has required that the pieces of the pier be labeled so they can be identified when they break off. And I know that they didn't use the word when, but in the possibility, I am suggesting that is an absolute certainty given the violence of the water movement in this area. And I know this sounds unkind to the applicant, but I think this may be a circumstance where approving the permit is a disservice to the applicant because of the materials that will be put in harm's way and will eventually become projectiles across the harbor in a major storm event. So 3 grounds, the last of which I think the public hazard is the most concerning and the most imminent, and that we have some evidence that there's other concern from authorities in the community, such as the harbor master, around the kind of damage that can be done by those storm events. So I hope that wasn't too long a ramble and was concise enough, but I'd urge the board's sincere consideration of those 3 things, and at very least, further analysis before an approval.
Thank you. Does the applicant want to respond to any of that?
Yes, we do. Wooden piles do not present a impediment to the water flow in the area. And as far as an impediment to the breakwater, that is something that if Army Corps feels there's some sort of an impediment to what they need to do out there, they will surely comment on that during our submittal process. Structurally, we're confident that the structure will be in good condition here. The harbor master does have requirements of all docks that they have labels and things like that on them in case they ever do need to know who owns them. So I think what you're being asked to consider here are items that Army Corps of Engineers is really in their jurisdiction.
Okay. We have another hand up of somebody. Thank you, Mr. Grady.
All right, it's Sally's 22. All right, keep it short, please.
We have someone on from, it said Sally's S22.
I believe Sally is trying again. We did just lose her again.
She's been unmuted. The person's not supposed to do anything, just speak when we unmute you. And keep it short, please.
Do we have any luck with that one, Jen? Well, why don't we go, we have another hand up. Maybe the other person can reconnect.
Okay, this is Joanne.
Hello,
Hi,
good evening.
hi, Joanne Kaplan, 16 Sunset Road.
Good evening, Ms. Clapper.
Scituate.
Yep. Thank
I was just thinking about a case in Hingham where there was someone who wanted to put in a dock. There was quite a bit of outcry by the rest of the town, but it was found that there really didn't have any regulations for docks in that situation. And it seems to me that perhaps this is a time when we can step back and look at what does it mean to build a dock in a place where we really haven't had docks in a high velocity zone with, I won't repeat everything that everyone said, but I understand your job is to carry out the regulations, but maybe it's time to look at new regulations. That's all.
Thank you. We have still a couple more hands up.
Amy, do you want me to assist you on that?
No, I have it. It's Sally 22. For some reason, it won't unmute. I guess we're gonna go to Nick.
Can you hear me?
We got you.
Thank you. Nick Damasio, 16 Roberts Drive, Scituate. I apologize for not attending the first hearing, public one there, and I've been listening. I just want to make sure I understand. Look, I go down there, my family goes down to that area. We love to walk that beach. We love to go to the jetties. It's easy, it's clean. Am I to understand that if this dock is approved, for me to get access to the jetties, I will have to walk under a 5-foot dock height at low tide?
No, there'll be about 14 feet of clearance at low tide.
Okay, what about high tide? I should have said at high tide, is it 5 feet is the lowest possible, correct?
See what we have at high tide. Do you know that measurement offhand? Look, oh, actually it's 5 feet at high tide.
Okay, and does that mean, or is that the highest, like a super moon high tide, just out of curiosity?
Mean high water.
Okay, thank you. Because then I would just like to go on record. My concern is access to the beach area. I've heard several others say that. It's a wonderful place to go. It's a wonderful place to walk. Access to the jetties is beautiful right now. So that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does somebody want to, let's try to get that, Sally's.
Sally, I just unmuted Sally again. Yeah.
Can you hear us?
Oh, good. It worked this time. I don't know why it was not working, but it's working now. So I'm Sally Jenkins out of 22 Sunset Road. And I just wanted to bring up a point that I don't think has been addressed, which is the breakwater out there, even on days when it's not stormy, serves as an important safety place for people who are kayaking or in smaller boats to kind of get out of the surf, or if a large boat is entering the harbor. And I don't know that I've heard anything that really addresses the dock's impact on that. Like, it is very close to the jetty, which is where that main safety area is. And I'm just very concerned that if the dock is there, it will prevent people from being able to kind of get out of the way of bigger boats if there's an emergency out of the channel, if there's a lot of traffic going on, or if there's a particularly dangerous storm or wind where a smaller vessel might need to take shelter in that breakwater behind the jetty where the high velocity zone is. And I also actually, somebody said something about the wooden piles definitely not having an impact, but I'm a little concerned that no one's addressed the fact that this is actually a very unusual water place for wooden piles to go. You don't usually see wooden piles in high velocity zones. So I'm not confident that that's been thoroughly vetted, to say with confidence, at least nothing that I've seen. Which is maybe a reason you should have consulted with the Army Corps just to see if there's any information on high velocity zones. Because certainly the Coast Guard dock has gone through enormous amounts of maintenance, despite being a much bigger dock, because of the higher velocity water there, and it's nowhere near the levels of water flow that you see behind the jetty. So those are just my only two.
So
concerns.
Sally,
We
just
talked about those last time, Sally.
Amy,
Yeah.
can I just, so for one thing, wooden piles are the required foundation for any home in the velocity zone. So when we condition homes that are being built in velocity zones, it's driven wooden piles are our preference. Some people use fiberglass, and in some cases they use concrete, but the majority of homes in a velocity zone are built on wooden piles. That's what we look for. So I think that hopefully that clears up that question. I do have I look at this and I look at property ownership, and I see the lot line, and I'm assuming Rick or Scott, does the applicant's ownership of the property go to low water? Is that right?
I believe it's to mean high water, actually.
So the lot line, when we're looking at your plan, I see a lot line that runs out to a low water. Am I looking at that correctly? Either Scott or Rick or Doug.
That it's drawn that way. All the way out to low water. The lot line is.
Because I know we've had different projects with people with different deeds as to where their property actually goes to.
I'm sorry, I misstated that. It is to mean low water. I just double checked it as we were talking here.
So most of this walkway is on the applicant's property, right? And then it's the ramp and the float that are in
The tidelands of the Commonwealth.
tidelands. Okay. And so most people that access that area have the right to do that. Am I right? There's a statute that allow people to move on that, or is that, I mean, there's a fish and fowl, but is that end at people that are fishing or hunting, or is that?
Oh boy, that is probably more of a legal question. It's fishing, fouling, and navigation is actually the actual law or regulation. I know that's used kind of loosely these days, whether people are really fishing, fouling, and navigating, or just enjoying the seaside.
Okay. There was, we do have a couple, well, let's take another call. I have one or two other questions. So I think we have Maura's iPhone.
Yeah, Moore's iPhone.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Good evening. Yep, we got you.
Okay, thanks, Frank. This is Maura Curran, 607 First Parish Road, member of the Select Board. I just wanted to ask for some further clarification on something that one of the residents brought up about traversing over to the current jetty. Are they currently traversing private property, and will there continue to be access for residents to get over to that jetty once this dock potentially is approved? And I don't know if that's a question for the engineers or the owner.
But just before you, I don't know if you could hear my question more, just before you did, was the question of private property, or where did their property end? So Rick, you
Right.
could pick it up from there.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah, the dock will not prevent anybody from accessing over those areas which they currently have rights to access over to the jetty, for instance. There is sufficient clearance. Obviously, there will be piles projecting down to the ground, but they can't obstruct the access.
And then are people are allowed, as Rick was saying, it sort of becomes a legal question. What can you restrict and what can't you restrict? It seems like the owners before allowed folks to get down Edward Foster and move back and forth. We've seen lots of folks walk the jetties, and the breakwater going around the cliffs seems to be pretty widely used.
And nothing is proposed to be changed as far as access.
No, access has not changed since Katie and I have bought the property, and we will not be changing access to any of the public moving forward.
Okay, and thank you. And we had Attorney Mitchell. I don't know if he wanted to speak more to that. We unmute Matt Mitchell.
Yep, Matt's on.
Matt?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Yeah, I was just gonna reiterate what Mr. Harold said about access to the jetty. There will be continuing access to the jetty, and as you spoke about the colonial ordinances of 1688, there's a right between mean high and mean low to traverse that anyway. I know it's fishing, fouling, and navigation, and that's an ongoing legal fight, but I don't think Mr. Harold has any intention of obstructing any public access to the jetty or the beach.
No.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I see Paul Armstrong's hand up, and I actually had a question for him regarding the construction. So can we unmute Paul?
He
Are
should
you-
be all set.
Paul, are you on?
Frank?
Yes, we got you.
Hi,
Great, thank you. Good evening. And why don't you just state your name and
Paul
role here.
Armstrong, 12 C Street, Marshfield, Mass. South Shore Pile Driving.
So Mr. Armstrong was at our site visit, and had some questions for him that maybe he could repeat here with regard to constructing the pier and the process, because we've had back and forth about whether things would come from land or sea or by the ocean. So maybe you could just explain real quickly that, if you wouldn't mind, and if you had another comment, that's fine. You could.
We'll be
say that.
accessing the entire project by land on private property, down through Mr. Harold's property. And starting from the bay side, working our way back out. They'll be driven with my excavator mounted machine. And after we're done, there's still plenty of access to walk around into, you can drive, vehicles around. There'll be plenty of room for anybody to access the jetty and so on. And structurally, we've been doing homes for over 40 years on pilings and in velocity zones. That's why the requirements of a driven pile is for a velocity zone. That's the design of it, for the water to flow through. So you don't have the restriction from the wave impacts. It's been proven for decades in how they work. Even look at the homes over in Peggotty Beach that have been out there on pilings for decades. And they've survived every storm we've seen since they've been put on piles.
Okay. Thank you. Did you want to add any other comments?
Just a comment about the chapter 91, as the attorneys and everybody else was stating. Everybody has the right to fish, fowl, and navigate throughout these piers and docks, and that's the whole design of it. It's designed so people aren't impeded by that, and all the regulations going through DEP for that approval. That's what this design is for. So it doesn't impact anybody's rights at all. It is between mean high water and mean low water. That's what everybody has the right to traverse through that area. That's how it's typically designed.
Thank you, Paul. And I know that a couple of folks have had their hand up in comparing this to the Coast Guard dock, because that seems to be the next one closest to the entrance to the harbor, and it is a distance away. But it looks to me, in looking at the pier for the Coast Guard station, it was built to hold a building there's actually a structure on it. And it also appears to me that it has a large number of planking to protect the boats from waves.
They did, they built a plank wall on it for wave action, correct?
So they have to build a structure strong enough to support that plank wall as opposed to a structure that water could flow through.
Correct.
So it's really, I'm not trying to make any comment to profess that I know whether this will stand up in a storm or it won't stand up in a storm. I understand folks' concerns about that. I'm not an engineer. I'm not going to make any statement to that, but I just, in terms of comparing the two areas, I think they're vastly different in what they were built to do. So
Absolutely.
it's hard
with,
to.
With the driven piles, and then we put the cross bracing on. It's designed for the water to flow, perpendicular through that. And it like I say, historically they've been around for decades, and I've never really ever seen a pier got ripped up from a wave action. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Does any other members have any other questions or anything they want to add to this? And I think we don't have anybody in the audience anymore. Am I right?
Okay.
This is one more, I guess.
Okay, Sandy.
And hopefully this is nothing that we've already said, because we're already 10 after 7.
Oh, boy.
We started at 6 o'clock, so
Sandy's on.
Great. Can you hear me?
we can. Can you
Great,
give us your name and address, please?
Yep. Sandy Jenkins, 22 Sunset Road. I'm just kind of curious, and if you already addressed this, please just ignore the question, about the size of the boat that's going to go there, and dredging needs. That whole area is pretty shallow. So I was kind of curious about the plans for that.
The 28-foot center console with an outboard motor. No dredging is proposed.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Sandy? Okay. Do we have any other comments from members, or Amy? Any other things from the applicant? Can I get a motion?
I make a motion to close.
I have a second.
I'll second that.
Second from Doug. Sorry, I put my list down. I should know.
Jen.
Jen says yes.
So Jen is,
Yes.
I'm sorry, we had a motion from Penny and a second from Doug. So all in favor, Jen, yes, Andy?
Yes.
And Frank, yes. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, 817 Country Way, we have a request to continue to September 11th.
I'll make a motion to continue 817 Country Way to September 11th.
I have a second.
Second from Jen.
Thank you. All in favor, Doug,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
and Frank, yes. Okay. 74 and 74C Glades Road. On August 7th, 2023 at 6 p.m., the Scituate Conservation Commission will hold a wetlands hearing under Chapter 131, Section 40 of the Massachusetts General Laws and Section 30700, Town of Scituate Code of Bylaws regarding the application of Near Drury for work related to reconstruction of a single-family dwelling at location 74 and 74C Glades Road, Scituate. Abutters and other interested parties are invited to attend. And information to access the meeting will be available on the agenda posted on the town website. Is there a reason that we can't also do 74B and discuss them all at the same time, Amy?
Maybe they're owned by different people.
No, it's the same owner, but I don't know. I was just thinking about that. I think it, Mr. Chairman, if you want to do it that way, I think you could open.
I'm going to open both of these. I think they'll
Yeah.
probably wind up blending together a little bit. We'll vote them separately.
Yeah.
So on August 7th, 2023 at 6 p.m., the Scituate Conservation Commission will hold a wetlands hearing under Chapter 131, Section 40 of Massachusetts General Laws and Section 30700 Town of Scituate Code of Bylaws regarding the application of near Drury for work related to reconstruction of a single-family dwelling at location 74B Glades Road, Scituate. Abutters and other interested parties are invited to attend. Information to access the meeting is available on the agenda posted on the website. So, and who do we have here?
Greg Morse is on the call.
Great. Good evening, Greg.
Good evening. Also on the call with me is Attorney William Eades from Drohan, Taccio and Morgan, and the applicant Near Drury. As was just read into the record, we filed 2 notice of intents. The first property shown on the screen here is number 74 and 74 C Glades Road. The second property is 74B Glades Road. These are all notice of intents for reconstruction of single-family homes that were destroyed in their entirety by fire on March 24th of 2023. The existing site here, was previously developed. It had the 3 homes on it. It had a gravel parking area adjacent to Glades Road, which is at the bottom of the screen. Each home had a septic system, was connected to public water service and gas service. The resource areas that we're talking about here at the top of the screen is the North Scituate Minot Beach, and associated with that is a coastal dune, which encompasses the entire site. Also land subject to coastal storm flowage. The entire site is located it's a velocity zone at elevation 20 for the majority of the site, with a small portion along Glades Road being in an AE at elevation 15, where the houses are proposed, that is within the velocity zone. The proposal here is to construct the new homes predominantly in the same locations where the old homes were. The footprints have changed a little bit in size. The old homes had encroachments up to, or in certain cases, over the property lines. They had decks that connected buildings to buildings. With these new footprints, we've brought them in so that they comply with a minimum of a 3-foot property line setback on all sides, and in some cases, compliance with zoning, which is an 8-foot side yard setback. We've proposed fire-rated materials where appropriate on the side of the buildings. The buildings did become a little bit longer in the east to west location by approximately 16 feet as they project toward the beach. The buildings will be constructed on full wooden driven piles, given that they're in a velocity zone. The first floor elevation being proposed at elevation 24, where the velocity zone is at elevation 20. We submitted a full set of structural plans stamped by structural engineer Rivermore Engineering with the application process. We would be reconnecting the water and gas services and reconstructing the septic systems in the same general locations where the previous septic systems were. Those were destroyed as well during the fire process. We're not proposing any change in grade. If you went by the site today, you'd see that the topography generally starts at Glades Road at elevation 10 It goes up to approximately elevation 13 or 14 where the houses are, and then it starts to slope off again toward the beach on the top of the page. No change in grades. We would put new gravel or seashell down over the gravel driveway location, which was disturbed during the fire and cleanup process. DEP had no comments on this. This went to the zoning board and received unanimous approval. And the fire department just emailed over comments a couple minutes ago, which I forwarded to your conservation agent in support of the building locations. I turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Amy, do you want to go first on this?
Again, I was talking and I was muted. Sorry about that. Yes, I'd like to go first. And just a couple of questions, Greg. So I'm glad that we have the structural drawings because they'll need to be incorporated into the orders. So I was trying to figure out, there's two separate septic systems, or are you combining it all into one? And do these have Board of Health approval?
So this property here, these two houses are going into one system. The other house has its own septic system.
And so are the number of bedrooms increasing?
No,
And do you have Board of Health approval on each system?
no, Board of Health is waiting on your review of this.
But I mean, so you've made it through most of their process, they're just waiting on us?
I believe they're just waiting on you. It's not an increase in flow. This complies with Title V requirements.
Okay, yeah, so I think the big point here is that, you know, we're seeing an improvement with them going up in compliance with state building code for coastal resource areas for beach, coastal dune, and land subject to coastal storm flowage, and their, you know, driven piles with no footings. You know, there's a modest expansion, but there's not really too much you can do on these lots. They're pretty small as it is. I mean, maybe we would possibly consider some native beach grass plantings and some mitigation. But otherwise, I think it's something that you can condition and approve both of these projects.
Me too.
Okay. Jen, this is your territory.
Yeah. It's crazy how you can walk by something so often and still forget what it looks like to a certain degree. And I can see on the plans here that there's post markers kind of at the property line along the path and the beach line. Greg, can you refresh my memory? That should be sharper. How many of those currently exist, and are those all new?
Sure. There were post markers there pre-fire. I believe they've been removed at this point.
Okay.
So the survey that I have pre-fire shows that there was a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them in place. We're proposing to put those back at the rear property line designation.
And on the side beach pathway as well.
Yes, there's 3 of them along the beach pathway there. Yep.
Are they proposing any other means of kind of like just controlling that property line?
No, just the timber, you know, pile cutoffs essentially.
Okay.
Just to demarcate the lot line.
I mean, it's a tricky place to live with so many people walking by. So
It
just
is.
curious. And I guess, you know, if there's a lot of lines on this plan, is there anything proposed for under these houses, or are they just going to be open pilings?
Just open pilings. I imagine you'll have some storage under there. I think there's, a kayak and some other beach supplies, but it's open pile foundation.
Okay, so no like propane tanks or, things, because there is so much wash through during storm events, and if they're, summer houses, just trying to be cognizant of,
Yep.
of all that.
No, none of that. All utilities would be elevated, and it's got a natural gas connection to the building.
Oh, I mean, like, gas grill tanks and stuff like that.
Gotcha.
Okay, I think I'm good for now, Frank.
Okay. Andy?
I do not have additional questions right now.
Okay. Penny?
No, I'm glad to see this is finally gonna happen again. Just a quick one, Jen, on those posts out on the beach, the property line. I think prior to the fire that the posts were connected with big ropes, so people would not go in their area.
Yeah, there's other, everybody has a slightly different strategy. Some of them,
Yeah. But I think that's
approved by the
what it
conservation.
was. Just to keep.
Yeah, I was trying to not lead the witness, Penny.
Yeah. No, I remember, it was nothing that would stop any water flow. Let me put it that way. It wasn't as though it was fencing. But other than that, no, I have no questions. I wish them well on this project.
Okay. Doug?
I'm good.
Do we have anybody in the audience on this one? We have a Carol.
Carol, you're unmuted.
Oh, hi. Yeah, well, this is actually Bob Tremblay on Carol's computer. 71 Glades Road, right across the street. So I have a question actually that pertains to the post and Jen Foley's questions earlier. First off, according to the the narrative, it says, and I'm reading it, the only work proposed within the area designated as coastal beach includes replacement of previously existing timber piles at the edge of the applicant's property. These existing piles are used to prevent public use of private property. So it is correct, there were ropes connecting them. But I have two comments about that. First, I believe the Drury's property extends to the low water mark down to Wall Rock. And so when you talk about property line, I'm a little confused about that. And the other comment I want to make is that looking at the site plan itself, the previous posts parallel to the shoreline were along that dotted line that you see on the site plan and joined up with the existing seawall to the right of the property on the plan. The proposal is to move those posts out, it looks like about 25 feet into the existing public access beach. And I haven't heard that mentioned at all. That beach gets pretty small now at high tide, so that's not an inconsequential. It looks like my calculation, 2,000 square feet. And I perfectly, acknowledge that the Drurys have the right if they, they own the land down to the watermark. They have absolutely every right, but I do think it should be noted and discussed.
Okay. Greg?
Sure. So the the applicant's property lines do extend down to mean low water. It is area that is publicly used, but he does own the beach area to mean low water at this location. Where he's proposing to put the piles, it is further back, further out onto the beach. It's along his interior rear lot line, if you will, because he owns on both sides of that lot line. It's, as stated, it's about 20 feet further back than where the pilings existed before. It is all the applicant's property, though.
That's unfortunate.
Right.
Right, I'm certainly aware it's on the applicant's property, but I just felt it was worth acknowledging this since Minot Beach is pretty iconic for the area.
Can I ask it? I'll get to it, but just kind of ask a question, Jen, you're familiar with this. So when they put these posts out there, is the intent to keep people off that area? I'm not familiar with that.
Yes. I don't think I had actually, I mean, obviously I was looking at this plan, but I was reading the posts where it said posts, which were probably the older posts.
I was
and
too.
not the new posts.
Yeah.
So I appreciate your point, Mr. Tremblay. That is a very significant amount of obviously their land, but impact to, you know, the historical use of the property.
Well, more importantly, I just think, are they needed out there? I mean, what's the?
Yeah.
The problem. I don't know.
Okay.
I would be in favor of keeping them replacing them where they were, especially given the moderate but still increase in size moving east to west.
We have a call in user 2. Can we unmute that person?
Yep, user 2 is unmuted.
Good evening.
Good evening. Joseph Gibbons, 223 Gannett Road. My family has used that beach for probably 60 years. There were never any posts out there until Mr. and forgive me for pronouncing his name, Mr. Drawer was there. In fact, I was friends with Jeremy Wee, whose mother, Nancy Walcott Smith, owned that property. And they did not go out as far as Mr. Drawer's plan. I think the public has used that area, as I said, for decades, even though it was not owned. I think there's some legal precedents there that the townspeople have used that. And for the record, I just want to say that. And I'm against this plan.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think we have the applicant on. I'd like to speak to this.
Mayor, you're on.
Hello,
Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay,
Good
great.
evening.
Hi, good evening. Near Drury, 74 Glades Road. So answering the comment the previous gentleman made, it's completely incorrect. I've never put any pilings in the ground. I purchased the house from Jeremy, which their family been there since the 1900s, and those pilings have been there since the 1900s. So I did not change any of the pilings or I did not put anything on the beach. To answer the comments on the new pilings where the distance between the new pilings and the existing deck is almost the same as what it was before the fire. Yes, we did push the houses a bit because we wanted to be safer and not to have the houses so close to each other. And that's the only reason why we pushed the piling a little forward towards the beach, and it is about 20 feet. But to answer everyone's comment, even over the pilings right now, I own another 60 feet towards the beach. And yes, I understand it's public beach and everybody's so nice and respectful. And although they are using our property, I'm seriously happy that everybody come in and enjoy it, and we love it there. So I'm not going to the property line. We own another 60 feet approximately over where the existing pilings are. So that's the comments that I wanted to make.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you can.
Guess we have another hand up again.
Okay, it's a call to the phones on.
I don't have anything to say right now.
Okay, thank you. All right.
So one thing I was just looking at, Frank, because, you know, it occurred to me that the town has received funding and is planning to go out to bid for the North Scituate Beach Nourishment Project.
Right.
And anyways, so, you know, I actually, the permitting of that was before I came here. So I actually was not really that familiar with the total area that encompassed. But I do know, or I've heard, that the plan for that project is to start in the north and go south. So anyway, I just pulled up the permit plan, and the nourishment area starts in front of 5423 and 5424 and goes, you know, south from there all along Glades to partway down Surfside, which puts the berm or the nourishment area that they're going to be bringing material onto in the area that we're talking about, which I'd be happy to send this plan around. But
so when you say the area we're talking about, are we talking about the area that are going to have posts placed,
yes.
or
yes,
the actual structures?
well, no, I would say the posts.
Okay.
I mean, the plan isn't really that detailed, you know, it just shows the parcel information. So I'll send it around. I'm not sure if Greg's seen this plan either, so I'm gonna send it to everybody, but not so sure that this is a reason we should pause this, but it's certainly, I think, well, unless the applicant would like to pause because of this, to double check with the DPW and make sure that, you know, they're not going to need to amend the project based on what the town is going to do in the near future. I'm not involved in those conversations with the DPW. I just rough enough so that I know that the timeline is out to bid this fall, I think, to try to start working even this winter on the project. I mean, I'm sure you've heard it discussed at select board meetings and other meetings, but.
Right.
So to that, a beach nourishment project is typically putting sediment and replenishing the sand or the sediments along a beach. This isn't an area that's, you know, where you do significant plantings and there's beach grass. This is all pure open beach dune at this location. Sediment and beach nourishment could certainly be placed around these posts, and these aren't significant structures. These are literally, wooden timber posts that are just put in place to mark a property line. They could easily be moved if they were in the way. You could put up sediment right up against them. I don't see that it's a big hindrance and would cause any delay with this project. I do appreciate you sharing that plan with me, though, because it's the first I've heard of it on this property.
My question, I guess, and I think it might be a reason to continue this, would be the impact of putting town funds on nourishing this beach that is going to be smaller for town access as a result of these pilings, which he has a right to. I'm not sure on the pilings specifically, but to have his piece of property.
Oh, boy.
The way, Amy, we were part of the process with permitting some of the beach nourishment projects, and I don't remember exactly the area that they proposed before.
Well, so I just sent the plan over, but so there's orders. The orders were set, I believe, in 2018.
Right.
And
So
like
has
the
the
winter of
town
2018.
has the town secured any easements to do that, or are that's part of their process?
You know what? I am not sure. I would think since they have funding that they have easements.
That would be my guess.
But if the easement was for the prior owner, I don't know how easements work, but
yeah, I'm not sure either if they carry with the property or it's with a, the entity. I'm not sure. Maybe that's a lawyer question. But like worst case would be we close and set orders, and then if something changes, they have to come back to us. You know what I mean? Like, so something they could come back. Or we could wait. And we have two hands up. We've got Colin, user 2 is back with a hand up, and Near has got his hand up. Near, you're unmuted, so you can just talk, please.
Okay, sure. So I know the town don't have any easement, but we definitely want to move forward and start the project as soon as possible so we can be back there by next summer. And if the town come back and said that they need any type of easement or any type of access, I would definitely work with them to provide whatever needed. I don't mind putting that in the decision that I would have to work with the town if they have any type of request or requirement. I'll definitely work with them, but I don't want to delay this project anymore. And I would hope you guys understand.
are you open to moving the pilings back closer to your house? Because that feels like it's the sticking point.
Well, there's a couple of things to bring up.
Well, there's other things, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, tell me what do you think that the issues are, and let's talk about it, I guess.
Can we go back to user number? There's a caller, user 2. Thank you, Mr. Story.
Yeah. User 2.
Yeah, I'd just like to ask, I've worked for many municipalities.
I'm sorry, this is Mr. Is this just state your name again? Sorry, because you were off. Is this Mr. Gibbons again? Okay, thank you.
23 Gannett. In this day and age with environmental sensitivity, why are we moving properties closer to the water? If anything, in most communities, they're moving away from the water. I currently work on Cape Cod right now, and you can't get anything approved moving closer to the water. So why are we approving something or seriously considering something that's going closer to the water?
And is any other commission members want to comment to? Maybe it's time I could make a few comments here. So we've had some discussions with building department, fire department, the property owners. These projects have a little bit of difference than, say,
No.
someone that's just coming to build a house, proposing to tear something down and build something new. These houses were destroyed by fire. The applicant's looking to rebuild them. Between code issues and trying to get some additional separation between the buildings. The question was whether or not these structures could move closer to the ocean. And we had some discussion about that. The agent, myself, a couple of members, as well as other town officials. And it seemed that in order for them to be a little bit more compliant, meet the code pieces, that the town would consider allowing movement towards the beach, because this wasn't in fact something that they chose to do, but something that was forced on them with a fire, and they have to meet some separation requirements a little bit, and also different code issues than were there when these houses were built. I do have a concern though in both projects with the amount of expansion towards the ocean. The house number 74 has gotten larger by a decent amount. It didn't change much in the rear, but it moved forward. It looks like another 10 feet or so. But then in the front of both number 74B and 74, there's now some fairly large covered porches. And it looks like they did have some covered porches before, but now we're having covered structures a lot closer to the water. And I do question that, if that's something that we want to look at, if those were decks rather than covered porches. I'm just, again, trying to weigh this out in the amount of expansion that's going towards the ocean. Once you have a roof over something, it isn't long before that becomes closed in or used even more significantly. So that's a concern. Jen brought up skirting under the houses, and I think we want to be sure in these houses that we have in the conditions that there's no skirting put around these houses, that there's just, we know that water flows through there, and any material that's placed there is just going to get washed away. So I don't think it's unreasonable to just say that there can't be any. But that's my opinion. Anybody want to?
I would support that, Frank, on all of those points. There is a pretty big, you said it well, on 74. That's kind of the one that seems to have the most amount.
Well, even 74B, if you look at the expansion of the footprint of that house compared to the old house, and then in front of that, you put a covered porch. In both those cases, that's a fairly large expansion.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's encroaching on the ocean side.
You're right.
On caller 2, if this is something different, we'll take it. We're already getting close to 8 o'clock, so trying to keep these to new comments. Mr.
Yeah.
Drury has his hand up.
Mr. Fitzgibbons, if it's something new.
I think it's just Gibbons.
It's Mr. Gibbons. My family's been in this town since 1954. I'd just like to say, which town employees were you referring to? The building inspector, Frank, and would you were kind of general about which town employees were kind of recommending that?
I would say town departments. It wasn't a recommendation. It was more a discussion about what was going to be required of the building and what they would need to change in order to be compliant with that. And then they went before the ZBA. So there was some feedback from the fire department on this. You know, they're looking for additional separation plus more fire protection available. CBA, there was interaction with that, which is part of the zoning officer as well. So there's been discussion about these projects and how they could be reconstructed and be safer.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Near, keep it
All
short.
right, sure. So as for the skirts around the house, I don't mind. I honestly, I didn't have the plan to do anything there. So I'm fine with that. We're gonna try to keep under the house completely clear as I know the water get there sometimes. And as for the porch, just so you know, Chairman, the porch was, it was a porch. It had a roof on it and it was pretty large. It was, I want to say 12 or 13 feet. And what we're proposing is 16 feet. So it's not that significant more than what we had before. We are trying to enlarge it by maybe 3 or 4 feet. That's all.
Well, I'm looking at both these plans. I can see them pretty clearly. I can see what was existing and I can see what's proposed. And in fact, the proposed project is overlaid on top of the building. So the in say 74B, the proposed house is larger than what the house was with the covered porch. So you've moved out beyond the line, moved towards the ocean more than where the covered porch line was by maybe 3 to 4 feet. And then on top of that, you're adding a 16-foot covered porch to the front of the house. So you're moving out probably closer to 20 feet on 74B. I don't have a scale on this, but somewhere between 16 and 20 feet out. And then on on 74, again, the new dwelling is 2 or 3 feet larger than what the covered porch was. And then you have a covered porch in front of that.
Huge.
So these houses are substantially larger than the house. I shouldn't, substantial is not the right word. They're larger than the houses are relatively small to start with. So they're larger than the house that was there before. I'm going to take into consideration that these are not large homes to start with, but to add significantly larger covered porches to both these structures seems to be pushing the spirit of trying to work with the property owner in moving closer to the water.
Yeah, I honestly, I didn't follow that exactly because I think some of the distance, it's because we pushed the houses because we were trying to stay away from the back houses. And then, if I'm not mistaken, we enlarged the house by 8. I don't know the exact numbers, but I know for sure that the previous porch was about 12 or 13 feet, and the new porch we're proposing is about 16 feet. Yes, you are right that it's bigger We try to do something a little bigger, but also again, those are small houses to begin with. If you look at the footprint of the house, I want to say it's 40 by 50 or 60. So those are small house to begin with, and 74B is 28 by 40, I believe. I mean,
For me, those are big.
yeah, they and 74C is 20 by 20. I mean, again, they're not big houses.
I 74C seems within what you would like to have there, and I get it that you wanted to move that further away from the other structure. I think that's wise. In the case of 74C, you're getting a larger footprint already.
Correct.
Greg, you're on, maybe you can scale it for me, but tell me the distance from.
It moves out 16 to 18 feet, depending on which end of the house.
Okay. That's on 74.
Yes.
And then how about 74B?
74B moves out 18 feet.
I think that commission members should be aware of that.
Yeah, thanks for going through all that, Frank, and Greg, for kind of sharing those numbers. I don't think that's something that that I'd feel comfortable with.
Frank?
Yes, Penny.
Yeah, could I ask Greg a question?
Yeah.
Supposedly, the buildings are narrower, okay? Yes?
Not really.
They're narrower with respect to the existing buildings had covered porches essentially on all sides of them. So they're narrower than that.
Okay. I guess I'm trying to say, what is the difference in the square footage previous to now, what they're proposing?
The square footage, because these are 2.5 stories versus what was not a 2.5 story house. At 74B, the existing house was 1296. The proposed is 2350.
But that's because we add in another floor. It's not
Yes.
because the footprint is bigger.
At house number 74, what was 2,203 square feet is becoming 4,200 square feet. And house 74C goes from 499 square feet to 1,290. All proposed as 2.5 stories, where they were essentially 1.5 story houses, or two at most.
So I guess my point, they are getting substantially bigger. They've been through the ZBA. The ZBA's jurisdiction is to look over these pieces. Ours is to look at where they're situated and their orientation towards the beach. And I get it that they have to make some of these changes, but they're going up now multiple stories. And on top of that, they're proposing fairly large covered porches on both these homes going towards the beach.
Yep.
No, but I think the confusion is the houses are. Craig, can you answer that question? How much is the actual house without the covered porch? What is the distance? What is the difference between the two houses, the previous and the existing? If you're not counting the coverage porch on the new ones.
I have the proposed distance of number 74. The side facade is 60 feet. I don't have the distance on what the existing was. If I had to scale it off my computer here,
It's only about 5 feet different. That's
It's-
all it is.
yeah, it's about 56 feet.
That's what I'm saying. So we're
Uh,
talking 4 feet different between the houses.
That's to the end of the covered porch. And then you're adding an additional 16 feet of covered porch onto that 60-foot house box.
Again, I can see a deck being extended out there. I'm just not in favor of bringing a roof structure that much further towards the beach in either one of those projects.
Yeah.
I mean, if we cut it back another 6 feet and only extended it by 10 feet, will that be okay?
If it was open deck,
That's what I was wondering. Is that would that be more palatable if those were open decks? And
Well,
not
that's
covered
that's what
porches?
I'm saying. If they were just open decks that were not impervious. I mean,
Yeah,
are these multi-story? We don't have any architecturals with this at all, right?
no, it's a first floor porch. Is what was proposed. You know, whether it's a porch or a deck, the footprint on the ground is essentially the same because it's going to be the same number of pilings supporting it.
But
Yeah.
it has a roof over it, Greg, as opposed to an open deck.
Would have a roof, but it is all over open sand dune, and it's all over land subject to coastal storm flow, which we're not concerned about drainage impacts off the roof. It would infiltrate in either scenario.
I'm again, we're trying to work with the applicant and allow them to move closer to there, but this to me seems more than I had envisioned when we had those discussions.
sure. Well, like I said, we'll cut it back. We'll cut it back.
Maybe, should we be just continuing this instead of spinning our wheels on this? Because either way, we'd want to see if there is going to be a change. We would be continuing it to see those plans.
Wait, couldn't you approve it and said if you cut it back by 10 feet, then it's approved?
I wouldn't.
What are we cutting back? The porch?
Yeah, we'll cut back the porch by instead of being over by 16 feet, then we'll be over by 10 foot. And if everybody comfortable with that, then that's what we're gonna design. I mean, obviously, we'll have to get a building permit, and we couldn't build what we wanted to if that's the thing if that's what you're not comfortable with, and you said no, 16 feet is too much, but I'm comfortable with 10. Okay, we'll cut it back 6 feet.
It's 8 o'clock and we still have 3 more hearings.
I think we need to vote to continue.
Yeah, and I think that people need to take a look at the North Scituate Beach plan and the
Yeah.
permits, because it appears to me that this berm could interfere with this build as proposed.
It looks to me, Amy, like it goes right on the seawall and then extends, which would be the dotted line on the plan.
It extends, yeah, and I've got the chapter 91, which has the plans on it too. I'll send that out too, the last 2 pages. But
I can see why he
So-
was pulling the posts back to
and
make more
also
backyard.
what they're nourishing with is a mixture of cobble. So everybody knows that. Cobble, sand.
So-
gravel.
Oh, it's cobble.
I would make a motion that we continue 74, 74B, and 74C to another meeting.
The motion, what do we have on?
Next meeting.
Well, will give us enough time to review the plan that Amy's sending out.
And
Good, I mean,
also, the applicant can revise the porch based on the feedback that you gave, that you want to see a deck rather than a covered porch. So I think was our sticking points. And then, I mean, the lattice, we can condition, we could really condition a lot of this stuff, but I think a revised plan and people looking at these other, the town plans could be important.
Is there enough time to do this on the 21st?
Sure. I mean, if that gives Greg a week. So
Greg?
Greg, is that good for you?
That's good on my end. Yep.
All right,
What-
so we're not gonna drag this out. We're gonna try to move it along.
One thing to look at, I mean, I'm just looking at this quickly, but it actually looks like they're proposing to change the slope
Yeah,
back
10
from
to
that
1.
seawall,
Saw that.
which that does impact that property quite a bit.
Yeah,
I think that's something that the applicant, their engineer ought to take a look at as well.
I'm not sure how they do that.
We're not gonna take any more comments on that. I
Yeah.
see a hand up from caller number 2, but we're not gonna take any more comments
Okay,
on this
so-
one tonight.
continue to 8/21.
Yeah, I'll
Yes.
second it.
That's a second from Penny. A motion by Jen, right? So all in favor, Doug,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
and Frank, yes. Okay, and that was for both projects. You made that for both, right,
Yes,
Jen? Yep. Okay, 53 Border Street on August 7th, 2023 at 6 p.m. The Scituate Conservation Commission will hold a wetlands hearing under Chapter 131, Section 40, the Massachusetts General Laws, and Section 30700, Town of Scituate Code of Bylaws, to amend the order conditions issued under DEP file number 68-2707 regarding the application of John O'Donohue for work related to raising and rebuilding of a single-family dwelling and stormwater permit for property located at 53 Border Street, Scituate. Abutters and other interested parties are invited to attend. Information to access the meeting is available as posted on the website.
and
Okay,
we're only
so
gonna discuss.
Greg
the
Morse
amendment.
is on the call. This is a request to amend, there's superseding orders on this, but I'll let Greg present on this.
Thank you. I'll try to keep it as brief as I can. Greg Morse, registered engineer for the applicant, John O'Donohue. This is a request to amend a order of conditions at 53 Border Street. This is a project that the commission approved. Previously, it was a single-family home raise and reconstruct project. The commission ultimately approved the project. It was appealed by an abutter. A superseding order of conditions was issued by the DEP permitting the project. The project moved forward. Today, the house is substantially been constructed. Earthwork at the site is substantially completed. Utilities are mostly in. The site has been rough graded. But there are several items that vary from what was approved previously. And we're seeking amendment to the original approval to rectify those issues. The first one, the limit of work, specifically up at the top of the driveway where the driveway connects to Border Street, was shifted. And in making that shift, that ultimately triggered the requirement for an administrative stormwater permit, because we exceeded the limit of work threshold for the site. We submitted a full stormwater permit and application to the Conservation Commission that was peer reviewed by Merrill Associates. And we have Merrill's sign off at this point on the stormwater devices proposed at the site. Secondly, we applied to the DEP for an amended superseding order of conditions. The DEP, Greg DeCesar, came out, performed a site visit. We walked the site. He reviewed our revised plans. And the DEP has issued an amended superseding order of conditions with the changes. That leaves us with why we're here tonight. The local bylaw portion of the project needs to be amended by the Scituate Conservation Commission. That is not amended by the DEP. The changes are relatively minor. The project did not change in scope. The changes that we've identified are outlined in a letter that I submitted to the commission on June 12th. The first one is with respect to the driveway entrance at the top of the property. Again, where there was an existing home at this site, the former proposal used the existing driveway. How the site has been constructed, the driveway is actually shifted approximately 20 feet to the west. It didn't change the impervious area calculations in any significant form or change the grading of the site in any significant form. Secondly, the location and elevations of the proposed subsurface roof dry wells changed as a result of our stormwater report. The original approval had the dry wells for the roof at the front right corner of the house, and I believe it only had 2 dry wells. Once we've done a full stormwater report on the site, we actually need 2 sets of dry wells, which you'll see on our plan here, one at the front right corner and one at the back right corner of the house. So additional dry wells were added. Thirdly, the original approval did not include a walkway from the front door to the driveway. We added a walkway. It's approximately 42 square feet in size. That was accounted for again in the stormwater calculations. The stairs off the rear deck were shifted from the original location to where you see them now. The proposed septic system vent pipe was shifted. It was originally proposed in a location which would have conflicted with the driveway. Where we've moved it is outside the driveway location, not the tanks or the leaching field, but just the vent pipe for the septic system. Sixth, the previously approved, there was a drainage swale in the front yard of the building. We've changed the grading slightly in the front yard. That grading was reviewed by DEP. It was also reviewed with respect to the stormwater report. Merrill made some recommendations on a swale along the side of the property or along the side of the house, which we included. And lastly, the retaining wall, which comes off the corner of the garage. As you're looking at the house from the street, the left front corner of the garage had a retaining wall starting at that corner and running to the side of the property. We've pushed that retaining wall where it connects into the garage back approximately 6 feet from the corner, just so that it allows for a side, service door essentially into the garage door or a garage at that location. None of these changes change the overall limit of work or scope of the project. Again, they were peer reviewed by Merrill Associates. The DEP has approved these changes. The original approval did have substantial mitigation plantings on the site. Those all remain in effect with your order of conditions. All plantings along the coastal bank and elsewhere that were originally approved would remain in our requirement of the order. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Greg. Amy?
Yeah, so like Greg explained, what happened. It's been a pretty long, drawn out process, which kicked off really as when the site started work, kicked into the stormwater bylaw review. So honestly, this has been going on since last August, with a thorough review of the stormwater management infiltration upgrade by Merrill engineers on behalf of the commission. And so there is a stormwater permit that would be incorporated into these amended orders, and the rest of it is really just tied to this site plan, which DEP has approved under the a superseding order, and the changes are as presented. I think that we had one question about written easement regarding the wall between the abutter and this property. And we'd like to see that something in writing with that easement. I think Frank and I had talked about that, but other than this, I think it is something that we can probably propose an issue tonight.
Okay, thank you. Doug, there's a lot of engineering here. Why don't you go first on this one?
There's a lot of lines. So the shift in the driveway, that's from where it says existing Bitconk driveway over to where it was moved over there, right? That's the,
Yes.
so that seems like the most substantial change. Is that to me anyways, like the rest of these things you described seem pretty minor in nature. And that's what triggered, and that's what's included in the stormwater review. So it doesn't look like, it doesn't look to me like there's a ton of increase of impervious area, was there, Greg?
No, there was actually a slight decrease.
Yeah, with the old driveway and the new, it just didn't look like that would be that substantial. So, things like moving the vent pipe and the swale and the steps, I don't think there's a concern. What's the easement that Amy just brought up? Are you talking about that existing fence? Is that the neighbor's fence?
Oh, so I think what's being referred to is along the northwestern lot line, in front of our house where
Oh, that retaining wall there.
there's a retaining wall. And so the
Okay.
neighbor there at number 61, their property slopes down onto our property. Okay.
Gotcha.
Um,
So to
they-
build this, you need a retaining wall.
Well, we're building up in front of our house. Now, behind the neighbor's house, number 61, they have an existing retaining wall.
I see that.
Bottom of it is approximately elevation 30, okay? Right in the middle of our proposed house, we're bringing the grade up to approximately elevation 35. And so to keep all of the work essentially on our own property, we could construct a retaining wall along the lot line and, it would match the grade at the property line. And then you would go over a couple of feet to where the neighbor's wall is, and then their wall would come up. Their existing wall comes up. The note that we have on the plan here allows us to eliminate that wall if the neighbor is in agreement that we can
I
just
see.
bring that fill over to the base of their wall and tie it in.
Which would make a lot of
Otherwise,
sense. Yeah.
it makes a lot of sense. Otherwise, you have two walls with a 4-foot ditch between them, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Some animal will get hurt.
it
Okay.
doesn't change the overall grading or drainage characteristics of the site in any fashion. But that was the purpose of that wall, was to show that we could do it on our own property. That neighbor is amenable to grading it out. We can provide written documentation to that effect if you feel it's necessary.
Well, I mean, it looks to me like that's actually outside of our purview anyway.
The majority
I
of it is.
Yeah, I mean, there's the stormwater issue is
Yep.
falls under our our responsibility, but the retaining wall, as constructed, is really outside of the buffer zone. Am I correct in that? Look at the
So-
50
so
foot
if you look
coastal
at the
bank buffer.
Yeah,
Or
it's
am I
it's
missing this?
all outside of the 50-foot coastal bank buffer. About half of the retaining wall is inside of the 100-foot coastal bank buffer.
Oh, there it is. The green line. Okay.
Yes, the green line.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. Thanks. Other than that, I mean, it steps down on the sides, looks probably a walkout in the back.
The house is a walkout in the back, yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, so there's a lot of lines on there, but they're just proposed grade lines. I can see the swales in there. Septic systems in the same location it was before. You're just moving the vent. So it looks pretty straightforward to me.
Okay.
That's a lot of ledge on that, all that hatching, Greg.
It,
Is that
it is,
ledge?
and
Yeah.
it is. Yep.
Well, you're
Like I
getting
said-
close to Cohasset, so you have to have some ledge.
Yeah, like I said, the house is I mean, it's up, it's weather tight, you know, and being finished, the house itself. So all substantial ledge removal has been done at this point.
All right. Yeah. So I'm good. It seems to me like is this what are we doing? Amendment or a modification?
No, amendment.
We're amending the
Amendment.
orders.
Okay. Yeah. So it seems appropriate to me.
Okay. Andy?
I don't have additional questions beyond Doug's.
Thank you. Jen?
All good.
Penny?
I'm happy.
Okay. We have one hand up. If somebody could unmute,
Yeah, Lynn, you're on.
It's Jim. He's gonna go for it. We're both on here. Okay, go ahead, Jim.
okay, thank you. Just make sure you name and addresses, please.
Okay.
Good evening. I'm Jim Spellman, and I'm here with my wife, Lynn Maloney. We
49 Border.
live at 49 Border Street. We've been participants in this hearing from the start. I sent to you, Frank, and to you, Amy, a letter that we drafted over the weekend that I hope was dispersed to all of the commission members. And I'm hoping that I don't need to go into great detail about that, but I am asking that that letter in its entirety be entered into the record. If I'd be happy to read it into the record if that would be more appropriate, but we get time constraints, and I appreciate that.
We did receive it, Mr. Spellman. It was late. I be honest with you, I scanned it before the meeting after. But we will definitely make sure it's part of the file.
Let me just brief because some of the commission members were not present during these just now 5 years of hearings. Let me just say a few things. The suggestion that we're looking now at minor modifications or an amendment for modern modifications belies a fact that's quite evident in the drawings that I presented. This drawing before you is quite different than the site plan on file with the notice of intent, which describes the just under 15,000 square feet that were considered the limit of work. If you were to visit the site or even review this plan here, they've expanded the area of the limit by well over 100%. They've cut down all the trees of the 6 mature trees at the roadside and others to the rear of the property. They cut all of those without the permission of the Conservation Commission, including a probably 75-year-old holly tree that was cut on day 1 that was specifically noted in the order of conditions to be preserved and to require the consent and oversight of the commission if it were to be removed, and only if it were damaged or diseased. These are only the beginnings of the rather major modifications that have happened to this site in the time since this proposal was initiated. Mr. Snow, you said to us many times in the 4 hearings that we had before you on this property, which is the reason we're here, is that this is an environmentally sensitive site. You said to me more than once, Frank, that Mr. Spellman, while we appreciate your concerns, they're going to be able to do this. There are rules that allow them to do this. In the end, we agreed that was so, but we established an order of conditions. There were, I think, 57 conditions in there. what should be clear to the board, and I want to make sure is stated, is that they've basically adhered to none of those conditions. The only one I can actually think that they adhered to was to take the sign off the one existing live tree at the roadside that they had nailed to the tree and put it on a stake, and it took them 8 months to do that. So I asked myself why we're here. I asked myself, and this is the nature of the letter that I drafted you, why after all of these things that they did without any regard to the hard work that the commission has done, why are they coming back with these minor changes, changing adding a walkway, changing the position of the back stairway? I have to believe that, frankly, it has to do with that retaining wall. That's been an issue from the start. And again, my letter to you documents those changes right from the start. Lucas Engineering said, what are you going to do about this wall? And in fact, Mr. Borkland, who was the petitioner at the time, in the end said, we'll take away that retaining wall. We're not going to, we'll take away any thought of grading onto the neighbor's property. And if we decide to do so, we will do so under a separate petition. You can read that in the first and second Lucas reports. This retaining wall is a big problem. It's Pam Keller said in the Merrill review that wall isn't going to be 4 or 5 feet high. It's going to be 7 feet or more, and a gully between that and the existing retaining wall to the west. Any suggestion that either filling that gully in or not is not going to change the drainage pattern seems just beyond credulity. These are things that it seems to me now has to be some reason why they're coming before you and asking you to spuriously accept these minor revisions. Be careful what you're doing. That's all I ask. If you look at the plan that's on the, well, you can't see the whole thing here, the Morse thing. Greg Morse has added, there were 13 notes on the original notice of site plan and the notice of intent. There are now 17, and it includes an addition that he himself added, to my eye, without any approval of the Conservation Commission, saying that he had permission to extend beyond the perimeter of his property and onto the other. Both the Lucas engineers early in the project and Merrill Engineering late in the project reminded him that he can't do that. First of all, you can't just write something onto a plan and say it's now approved without the scrutiny of the Conservation Commission. He's trying to do that here. And furthermore, and unless I'm misunderstanding town law, you cannot go and offer to extend your project onto someone else's property without their expressed permission, and that needs to be in writing, and that needs to be on the notice of intent. And my understanding, and again, this was Pam Kelleher's understanding, and it was Lucas Engineering's understanding, they're well documented. You have to go back before the commission. You probably need the abutter needs to file a notice of intent. That requires a whole new abutters notifications. There's a process.
I think so.
There's a process, Frank. There's a process, Frank, that's born out of the rules that you guys have established and expect to be adhered to. I'm simply saying that's not being done, and we have a right to challenge it.
Well, I'm going to try to address some of the things fairly briefly in your letter. And we know that there were some issues that happened on this site at the start of the site that none of us were happy with, the clearing, the cutting, and the commission's been addressing those issues, and we're going to continue to do that to make sure that we get some replacement areas. Some of these are outside of our jurisdiction, but they're still within the project, and they were not supposed to happen that way. And we're going to do our best to make sure that we get reimbursement's the wrong word, but that replication get done to deal with those issues. When you mention extra notes on the plan, I mean, the things that I'm reading are things like the wall has to be constructed in the event that a wall is constructed, it has to be by a structural engineer. They have to use dig safe. I'm just not seeing anything in those notes that.
Number
that-
16, Frank.
So the wall within the property line may be eliminated. And so that's what we're here doing tonight. I mean, the commission has two mechanisms to allow changes. We can have a minor modification or we can amend it. When an amendment's done, then it's a public notice. So you get notified. So in my interpretation, they are fulfilling that requirement when they request for an amendment. So now we're all at the table to see what these changes are. The applicant is telling us that they have worked out something with the abutter, and we'll need to have that before we can issue an amendment for this order. So from the start, to be quite honest with you, I thought that it looked foolish to have two retaining walls with a small
So did we.
gully in the middle. So and apparently you agree. So here we are trying to remedy that situation. We have not only the applicant's engineer, but we have our peer review engineer saying they both feel that this works and that it doesn't have additional impact that's not that would create any adverse issues. So we have both their engineer and our peer review engineer looking at that. We're all looking at it together in a public format, and we're going to have that letter before we do that. The point that they're going to do some work on the abutting property, I don't know if that's a real sticking point or not, that the actual work, some of that gets done on the neighbor's yard. If they're in agreement, I guess we'll probably find out from DEP if that's an issue or not. I understand, as I have in the past, your concern for this area. It is a sensitive area. We've had a lot of discussion and a lot of hearings. We aren't turning a blind eye on this project. Have I been out there every week or every month? The answer is no, but I've visited that site on multiple occasions. The applicant knows that we have concerns, that we don't want to see more encroachment. And I think we're going to take a hard look at, as they move forward with as-built and whatnot, to be sure that they have constructed what they told us they would. I understand your concern as a buddy. You've had that right from the beginning, and certainly scrutinized this project a lot. I'm just trying to figure out where in these amended orders they're causing more harm. I guess that's
I'd like to, can I make a couple comments?
yeah, sure. No, that's fine.
You're struggling with this too, and I appreciate that. Let me comment on two things.
Yep.
First, to hear you say that the commission has struggled as we have with the gross.
That's not fair. Okay, you're a lot closer than we are. So
well, okay.
You don't hear the jackhammer.
Yeah, you
yeah,
do.
That's true.
That's true. But it relieves me somewhat to hear that you understand, as we do, that he grossly violated an order of conditions that was clearly established, and we hammered at it, and we all agreed this is okay, we'll proceed. You see, if you look at the pictures I sent you, there's a picture a couple days before the project began and the one after. He didn't.
Yeah.
He just willing. You get that. You get that.
I went down the street, I saw the clearing, and I called Amy, and we met with them pretty quickly.
And our hearts broke, and you know what happened? The very next day, he sent us a letter from his lawyer saying we weren't allowed to trespass to walk onto even to walk from the roadside onto his property. I mean, this is not a neighborly thing that this guy has done. So anyhow, if the commission understands the seriousness of the violations here, then I would hope, if not in this session, that at least there's a public forum in which we can address the reparations, because we have to find a way to do that. We'll leave that as issue aside. The other issue is, it feels to me like these guys actually tried to sneak in this issue of that retaining wall on the western property. Look at it. It's a second phrase in item number 7, where he's basically just, hinting at this wall. This is a major issue. There's been an issue from the start. That it was, as I said, Steve Borkland is on record on saying if we don't keep that wall there, we're going to agree to a separate petition and a separate hearing. Now, that hasn't been done. That's what this commission decided should happen. Look, the house is essentially built. That's right. The trees are down. There's no way we could put them back. But we have to, as a commission, I just feel you have to, and our job as the butters is to hold these folks to the standards that we've established.
But I think, but that's what we're doing right now. They've requested that we amend the orders, which is essentially the same as having another meeting. I mean, sometimes folks can't see things on us. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I can see that. I'm not blind to that, Frank. But it seems to me the whole purpose of this meeting is give me permission to not put that retaining wall up and grade onto the other property. It's not going to be a several foot grading difference. It's going to be 5, 6, 7, 8 feet grading difference by the time this is all said and done. You wait. If that's what we're heading toward, then at least let these folks have the fairness to tell us that's what they're up to. That seems fair, doesn't it?
Well, but again, that's what's happened right now. I mean, that's what
If I hadn't brought it up, Frank.
No, okay. I'm aware of it. I've been aware of it. They've had multiple discussions about it. We've looked at this to see if this does make sense. And in my personal opinion, it's a better look, whatever, than having, if these folks hadn't worked out this arrangement, there'd be this ravine between the two properties, which would happen if they weren't getting along or weren't cooperating together. So,
and I get that, but if your memory's good, you'll remember that this issue came up in the second or third of the 4 hearings we had. It was contentious at the time. Borkland said he had a solution. He didn't, and he's passed it on to O'Donoghue, who doesn't yet have a declared solution. That's all.
Okay.
You know that.
All right. And I think, okay, sorry, go ahead.
Hi, Frank. Lynn Maloney, 49 Border.
Yep.
Can I just add a couple things?
Sure.
Here's my concern. There was going to be a meeting about this driveway, and before there was ever a meeting about this driveway, the heavy equipment was in. They were outside of the work order limits and pounding away at the ledge, which they weren't allowed to remove last week before this meeting. They have a habit of doing something and then going back and saying, is it okay if we do this? It would be like that dock in the first hearing. If they put it up and then came to you and said, can we put up this dock? Oops, we already did it. So, I mean, they're outside the limit of work, and they're pounding ledge to make that driveway when they're now coming to you and asking for permission. That's unacceptable. And my concern is that, first of all, I'd like some kind of reassurance from someone that all the trees that they cut along our property line they were not allowed to touch, that somehow that's remediated so that they're replanted. There was cutting that was done down, and that was even done by them once, done by Bjorklund right before he bought this property. It was down on the coastal bank. I don't know if that's, the whole coastal bank's been denuded. I don't know if that's gonna get taken care of. And my other concern is that there's 10 orders of conditions that are attached to this deed, and how is that ever going to be? I mean, everything going forward after the construction, when involving sprinkler systems and fertilizer, how is that ever going to happen when they haven't even, they put in a driveway without asking? That's my concern, is that the lawlessness of this is out of control, and how is it going to get accomplished going forward?
Lynn's right. Lynn's right. 10 of these conditions run with the deed. 10 of these conditions require adherence in perpetuity. It's not just you can't put in a sprinkler system and you can't extend the lawn. You can't cut the coastal bank. You can't clear the trees. If this guy is, if these people are so wantonly disregarding the order of conditions, what gives us any assurance going forward that they're not going to take the same standard? That's our concern.
I can only tell you, we have the orders in there, and the commission will have to follow them as well as we can. And with the amount of development that goes on today and the amount of orders that we try to impose or apply to these projects, and do the best we can to continue to follow those. And I think that you're certainly making your point. This project certainly bears watching. Amy and I have had, go ahead.
I'm sorry, let me just add, because I fear I don't want to come across. Look, you folks worked very hard. We appreciate that. We've had a tempestuous exchange through this stuff, but Lynn and I very much respect what you did. Our issues are not with you. Our issues are not with the commission. And the fact that these hearings began in early 2018, that's 5 years ago, means that of course, none of you should be expected to remember the particulars. That's what abutters are for. That's what these hearings are for, is that concerned citizens can say, wait a second, didn't we decide this? Didn't we agree to this? That's all I'm doing, is bringing that back to the table. And I think as a reminder, it's an important reminder.
And I understand your reason and logic for doing that. And it does bring this back up, which is something that you're certainly within your purview to do, and it's something the commission should hear. We also know that this was appealed, and DEP reviewed it as well. I think this project's had a fair amount of scrutiny, and it probably needs that right to the end. I think if that's the point you're trying to make, I get it.
But the thing is that the project had a lot of scrutiny, and there was an order of conditions which everyone agreed to live with, and then it was completely violated, and that's the problem.
I get it.
Well,
and all those notes are taken.
So again, my question is, will there be any kind of remediation in terms of the replanting of what they weren't supposed to?
I'm going to discuss that with Amy, because there will be, yes, and we have to figure out how we want to impose that on them.
And we of course would either be part of that conversation or at least informed.
I think if it's going to be a change, we'll probably wind up looking either an amendment or some sort of notification for that as well.
We very much appreciate it, Frank. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Looks like we have Mr. O'Donoghue on.
Mr. O'Donoghue, you're unmuted.
There we go. How are you?
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you all very much. I appreciate all the comments by Mr. and Mrs. Spellman, Mr. Spellman and Ms. Dr. Maloney. I do believe that some of the things that they said are absolutely 100% true, and that I did make mistakes, not intentionally. And I've tried to live up with that, and we've agreed to replace some numerous things that we cut down by mistake. That's fine. But the whole point of this hearing is the stormwater runoff permit, which has been approved by the DEP and eliminates the second retaining wall, which would create a sluice running down through that, creating more of a high water velocity running into the wetlands and the coastal bank.
That's what we said.
And that's what they actually, Mr. and Mrs. Malone, Spellman forced our hand specifically with the Conservation Commission to get the stormwater permit. So now that we have the stormwater permit override and it's approved by the DEP, I don't understand the reasoning for them questioning why we should have the permit approved by the Conservation Commission. I'm going to refrain from being malicious like they are. I'm just going to say we've done what we've supposed to do. We had some mistakes. We're going to correct them. We're going to replant. We had that discussion from the very get-go. And I will say that Mr. Spellman and Dr. Maloney and I have not had a conversation in over a year, whether it's text message, email, or voice on any of these things, but they continue to write letters to the neighbors and so on and so forth and do what they do with this Conservation Commission. I will do what is required by the Conservation Commission, by the building department, by anybody in the town of Scituate to build this house and do the best I can. And that's all I can say.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I appreciate you coming on and I appreciate you acknowledging some of the earlier issues. I would like to see this project get completed in an orderly manner and that the commission can sign off on. I realize that changes get made on a project as they become more apparent. I think we're all on the same page with the elimination of the retaining wall. And I think we'll obviously have some discussion about some the replacement of vegetation and whatnot. We'll get that in a plan that the commission can review. And I really don't think we need to we get still a couple of hearings to go and it's 8:45. So
Right, and I will let you go if I'm still online.
Sure.
I do have an agreement with the other abutter, Mr. Lou DeFranco and his wife Jessica, to feather the land in with theirs and get rid of the second retaining wall, and I will have that to you in writing tomorrow.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. I appreciate it.
You have a good night.
Good night.
So I think there's nobody else for this, right? Any other members have any questions?
Frank, can I just,
Go ahead.
I may be wrong, but what Mr. O'Donoghue's just proposed, I think that by statute is going to require a new notice of intent from the neighbors and a new round of hearings. Maybe that's what Pam Kelleher said, and that's what Lucas said. So I'm not a lawyer, but you might want to check that out.
Okay. Well, there's still no reason we can't close this and
I make a motion to close.
we have a motion from Penny. I have a second.
Second, Andy.
All in favor, Doug
Yes.
and Frank, yes. Thank you all.
What about Jen?
Jen is
Oh, all right.
had
He
to
just
step.
dropped.
Yep.
Yeah, that's okay.
So 59 Glades Road on August 7th, 2023 at 6 p.m. The Scituate Conservation Commission will hold a wetlands hearing under Chapter 131, Section 4 of the Massachusetts General Laws and Section 30700 Town of Scituate Code of Bylaws regarding sorry. So amend the order of conditions issued under file number 682788 regarding the application of 59 Glades Road LLC for work related to proposed pool, patio, landscaping, retaining wall, and property located at 59 Glades Road, Scituate. Abutters and interested parties are invited to attend. Information to access the meetings available on the agenda post on the website.
Good evening. This is Greg Morse for the applicant.
Hey, Craig.
Hi, as was just read, this is a request again for an amendment on a notice of intent that was filed at 59 Glades Road. The property owner, Ed Walsh, is on the call as well tonight. This was a single-family home raise and rebuild project that the commission permitted several years ago. The home has been built. The site is fully stabilized. It's occupied at this point. As part of the original approval, a swimming pool was proposed on the south side of the house, but the location of that pool, the size of that pool have changed slightly. The location of the retaining wall and deck layout along the back of the house changed slightly as well. That retaining wall and deck have been constructed and are fully stabilized. The pool itself has not been constructed. So we're seeking an amendment for the revised pool retaining wall layout. The work was all in areas that was existing lawn. All of the work as built and what's proposed lies within the original limit of work and the original erosion control barrier. And everything, the pool itself is outside the 50-foot buffer zone. Where the deck and the retaining wall were built, again, were existing lawn with the previous house that was there. And the deck was originally approved inside of the 50-foot buffer zone along the back of the house. It was all built in accordance with FEMA's standards. The back of the property is in the flood zone. The proposed pool is outside the flood zone. Turn it over to you.
It's too bad, Greg. What we really probably should have had here was a plan that showed what we did approve.
Yep.
I have it,
So
and
there
I
it
can
is.
try to share it.
You got it.
We've got it.
You have it? Because I can
Yeah.
send it out by email or I can try to share it, but it's
No.
No, it's up on the screen, Amy.
the approved plan.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yes,
Yeah.
great.
All right. So,
The shape
all
of
right,
the pool
Amy,
is
do you want to
different.
comment on this one?
I mean, I think you guys can see what's going on here. I mean, if you look at the plans side by side,
Yep.
the retaining wall is now built in the 50, so that's not ideal. Not really sure how you want to handle it.
Oh, it's
Maybe-
already there.
Yeah.
I wasn't on site when it got built, but what I imagine happened is what you see on this plan is you see the dark black dashed line behind the proposed retaining wall. That was the erosion control barrier that was staked out on the site. I think they built the new retaining wall on the uphill side of that erosion control barrier. Right against it, but it is inside the 50.
Yeah,
Yeah, Jen, if you can go back to proposed, please.
yeah.
She's got it. Or the new one. Yeah, just you got to keep flipping back and forth, but okay.
Oh,
I mean, I can tell you this is that I do recall the details of this NOI review in that we had a peer review. We had Sebacia out there and spent quite a bit of time delineating the salt marsh and the sensitive plants along there. But it was a raised rebuild. I mean, in the upper right corner, there was a garage and
yeah, that's
so
gone.
that's gone. I don't know. I think I would say that there should be some kind of a mitigation plan based on this encroachment into the 50, because I mean, that's a pretty strict, no touch area that we maintain under the bylaw. So this would not meet that requirement.
Okay.
Could they do plantings on it?
On the original plan,
No, on this new plan.
I don't see anything proposed at this
Well, but
point.
could they, for mitigation, Amy, I'm asking?
Yes, we could.
Yeah. I think maybe they should talk to somebody about it and come up with a plan.
Yeah, we could easily accommodate a 2-to-1 ratio of that area of the wall there inside the 50, and place it right along the salt marsh in the back. It was essentially lawn right up to that salt marsh,
Yeah.
with the house that was there, and there was a building back there too. So there's room back there to mitigate. We could do that at a 2-to-1 ratio, no problem.
Okay. Doug?
Yeah, well, that I was, that's exactly what I was kind of thinking is, or hoping for, that that could be a good solution for that and get some mitigation in there to make improvements. It was all just lawn back there. That gives you a lot of opportunity there to do
Yeah.
something a little, healthier for the wetland. So, I think that's a good idea.
Okay. Andy?
Yeah, I mean, you can see how carefully we initially permitted this to stay out of the 50. So I really don't like seeing the intrusion into it. So Greg, you said the deck is built and the retaining wall is built, but the pool and the pool deck are not?
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, so it seems like taking the retaining wall out would, to me, would be more disruptive. So I think that should be mitigated, but I wouldn't be in favor of approving the pool deck and the pool intrusion. Like, I think that could be, or that could be designed back so the deck and the pool are within the 50.
Out of the 50.
Out of the 50, yeah, like that I wouldn't want to approve it as it's shown here in the 50. And I mean, I don't know, I don't like these later intrude. I think we can make a case to have the deck rebuilt to fit where it was, right? That doesn't, I think that wouldn't have the negative impact that removing the retaining wall would. That could be redone and put back sort of minimally intrusive in the 50. So I could see something like that.
What's the deck made of, Greg?
Either wood or composite. And it was approved at a distance of 46 feet from the wetlands.
Yeah.
On sonotubes. And what got built is a deck that's it's elevated up off the ground. It's at the first floor level. It is on sonotubes. I don't have a distance on the plan here, but it's close to that 46-foot mark. It's plus or minus a foot of that.
But I think Andy was talking the deck around the pool. Yes?
No, the deck itself.
No, the deck on the back, right? It was only on sort of.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Only on the right side with the corner in the.
Yeah,
in the 50,
right.
and that sort of extends the whole back.
Yeah.
In the 50 or across that whole extra part.
Yep.
Do we have anybody in the audience for this one?
No.
Being none.
So Greg, if I'm reading this right, is this a pervious patio that's going around the swimming pool?
Yes.
The complete patio
is
going to be pervious.
Correct.
Okay. Well, I think same as everybody else here. I mean, we just heard it in the last application, or the amendment, that we condition these projects, and then, once the gate gets kicked open, people go back and build
what they want,
which is frustrating. and this one's no exception. You know, whether it was malicious or whether it was a mistake, you know, we go through these real extremes, and I understand these people removed a garage and they did some other improvements. I kind of remember some of these discussions too. So we had some gains with this site. But at the same time, we had restricted where these things would go, and now we're looking at something that's built, and we have a number of these going on. I would say before we condition this, that we get a plan that's showing mitigation for these, and I would think that it's at least 2 to 1, given that it's after the fact. You know, we've got a site on Third Cliff where we're bringing an engineer in to review a significant change that they did to a plan. I think at this point we've determined where the salt marsh is, but I'd like to see a real robust plan of mitigation along that marsh line, and I wouldn't mind seeing it bigger than 2 to 1. I mean, 2 to 1 for that area is not a big area.
Understood.
And I think conservation markers would be good,
Yep.
and detail on the pervious pavers so that we can see the area of the decking, and with Andy's comment, keeping that patio out of the 50 despite the retaining wall. So maybe, you know, maybe some plantings in that area in between. Is that what you're thinking, Andy, maybe?
I like that.
And the contours
can-
aren't on this plan, Greg. So on the proposed plan, we've got the slopes shown.
Yep.
It would be helpful if we knew what the grading looked like on the site.
Sure, I can add the grading. That's not a problem.
Can I clarify something with Andy, maybe to be sure we're on the same page? Andy, when you were saying not wanting to have the pool deck extend past the 50, so they have an area that now that they have a retaining wall, it looks like they're proposing a fence as well. Are you saying that you would not want them to see them do the patio for the pool?
Yeah.
Further out than the 50?
Yeah.
Or, yeah, I mean, it kind of went a little bit into the 50 in the previously approved, you know, something that looks a little more like the previously approved version, or looks like the previously approved version.
So I guess my question would be, just if there's already a retaining wall, it's squared off, and there's this strip that's in the 50, it would be nice to see some plantings up on top of that retaining wall. But if I were looking at trying to get good mitigation and protect the marsh, my feeling is that a really substantial planting along the property line, along the marsh, would be much better, or be more effective mitigation. I don't know. That's just my own feeling. You know, we don't have to accept anything that we don't want to. You know, Greg's saying 2 to 1, but I'm thinking that a much broader strip across that backyard, and as Amy said, you know, markers would be much more beneficial. Although some plantings up on top of that area around the pool would be helpful as well. But if I were, from an ecological standpoint, I'd rather see a much more substantial.
Can you show the other plan again real quick? I just want to look at the topography, because he really can't do, I guess, I mean, we can't ask him to do anything beyond his property line. So there's that big void between the property line and the salt marsh.
Well, there's part of it that's right up against it.
Right, on the left, like the left side.
Yep.
Back, rear property, he's got that. So I was just looking at the contours, but you know, how much room he has in there to mitigate with.
Do we
and-
know what
and
that
make a-
even looks
make
like?
a connection.
I wonder if we know what that strip looks like, Doug, between that property line and the salt marsh.
Well,
If that,
there were two mature trees back in that corner as well.
are they
which
still there?
They should be, unless something happened to him. Ed is on, Ed's got his hand up. I'm gonna lower.
One's a 12-inch, one's an 8-inch.
Can we get Mr. Walsh on?
Yeah.
Hi, how are you? Thank you.
Good
Yeah,
evening.
good evening. Those two trees are still there.
Great.
Yeah, and then also too, the existing, the entire backyard before we owned it, when we purchased it, was fully grassed, and it's still continually be fully grassed. We actually grassed in where the existing garage used to be. That's all grassed, and where the retaining wall got bumped out further, it was nothing done malicious here, guys. If you look on the original plan, it was a curvature wall, and I live in Easton full-time, and I wasn't here every day when they were building this thing, and the contractor had a hard time trying to figure out how to use the curved walls. So he just squared it off, and that's why it went out where it was. I think to Greg's point, maybe the mistake happened because of where the I forget what you call those barriers that you laid on the ground, Greg.
The erosion control.
Yeah, the erosion control, yeah. And as far as like the back deck, that's an elevated back deck. So the top of that deck sits at like, I don't know, 12 feet high, 8 feet high above the ground. And it just goes down into a grass and crushed stone area for drainage. So there's nothing, it's completely impervious. So really it's from the back of the house straight down, hits either grass or some stone that we put underneath the deck, just so drainage is, goes down fine. So the deck isn't on the ground. There's nothing impervious above that. It's all grade. How they built it out beyond it, where they put the sonotubes in, I don't have an explanation for that, why that happened. The contractor just did that based off of the plans that we gave him. So I'm not sure how that mistake did happen, but I think on the wall itself, it was the curvature versus the square. If you look back at the existing proposed new plan, it shows the difference between the two walls. And that's, I believe that's how that took place. There's nothing malicious going on here, just so you all know. And then when it comes to like my property line against the marsh, be more than happy to do some type of mitigation there. If you guys are willing to approve this, obviously, I'd have no problem with that. And that's really all I need to add, unless someone has any additional questions for me. But the whole thing is just a big grass backyard with two trees in it.
Mr. Walsh, the area that there's like an area behind your, it's at the end of the easement. So there's an easement that goes down, and then there's sort of
It's
a
all-
strip. There's a strip of land that,
grass.
so
Yeah, it's
from
all-
your property line out to the marsh, that's
Yeah.
all lawn.
Yeah, right. And that's really marsh too, guys. Like you guys show it as grass, but like on the super high tides, the water comes up right to the edge of that property line.
Okay.
So that's marsh. So like if you wanted me to mitigate my whole line there, the back of the line, I could definitely put some plantings out there. Be more than happy to do that.
Are you maintaining that property beyond your property line, or is your neighbor, or how does?
No one is. No, it's just grass. It's just the original grass line that was there.
Okay.
No. And then all we did was remove the large garage that was out back there and got rid of that impervious, proposal. But I don't know if anyone has any additional questions for me.
Andy, I'd like to maybe swing back to Andy.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you, Frank. Like maybe the benefit is more if we mitigate. At the same time, I guess I mean, the deck wasn't just squared off; it was extended
Without question.
So so Andy, so I'm referring to the retaining wall.
Yeah.
So the retaining wall has a square, it goes out and goes square. Like I said, how they went to the point they did, and that goes from like the other deck as well. Like it was just They were just given the plans that were approved, so that my contractor clearly made a mistake.
Yep.
There was nothing malicious going on, because I had the pool already approved before that wall was built. So like, I'm not looking to bend any rules here. I'm just looking to put a pool in for my family, and mistakes were made, and Greg noted them to me and said, we need to go back and get this mitigated, because we could have just put in for, I could have went down to the town and put in a pool permit in, and you guys would have rubber stamped it because it was already approved, and he didn't feel comfortable and I didn't feel comfortable with what he discovered with the retaining wall. The deck itself, I wasn't even aware of that part. It was never discussed with me and Greg. It's the first I'm hearing of the deck off the back of the house, to be perfectly honest. I swear to you guys. And it's the first I've heard of it. Was now me and Greg never discussed it. And I didn't realize it impeded in it as well.
Yeah.
So that's all news to me. The nice part about, I guess, about the actual deck, it's completely impervious. It's up in the air 12 feet, and it just, rain goes through it and goes down into the grass below. So hopefully that won't be a major issue. The retaining wall, I get, is more of a concern. And like I said, I'd be more than happy to do some mitigation out back. I also agree with Frank on the mitigation. It seems like it would make more sense if it was up towards the marsh, just because I see the water come in from the high tides. So I'm open for discussion on all that, but if it could get approved based off of some type of mitigation agreement we can do today and save all of us time from getting back on this again, that would be great. But if it can't be, it needs to be extended, like kind of leave that up to Greg and you guys.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I guess, Frank, the big picture question, I guess, in my head is just, do we go with more mitigation and agree that that's beneficial? The flip side is, are we sort of continually sending the message like, well, if you go 15, 20 feet over after we've really nitpicked the limits, it's gonna be okay to plant, that's,
Right.
I'm not.
No, I hear you.
That's my question.
Yeah, and the only other thing I would like to add, and I don't know if Greg can speak to the exact number, but this isn't 15 or 20 feet. This is probably at best 5 or 6 feet over that line, just so you know, because to me, that drawing doesn't look accurate, but Greg was out in the field. He could probably give you a better measurement, but it's like off the back corner of my house, that wall probably goes out 12 feet. And that's including the stairs. So it's probably, that stairs is 4 feet wide, so it's probably like 6 to 8 feet past that. But I'm not sure if the house was put in the wrong spot with the foundation. That could be the problem where it started. I don't know. I'm not like an engineer by any means, and there was no malice here. This was just something that came to our attention based off of me calling Greg up, say, hey, we're ready to do the pool now. Can you come out and document everything so we can put a proper permit in? And that's how this all came about. So I'm not sure how to take it, Greg. I don't know if you want to add anything to that or not.
I mean, I think what I'm hearing is that we need to look at mitigation to offset those encroachments. Potentially along that back grassed area, along the back lot line on the salt marsh. I think that's something we certainly can accomplish. We can do that. Whether we can come up with a number tonight, or whether you want a revised plan and to see this at a future hearing, either one is acceptable with me.
Me as well.
Okay. Well, Andy, I get frustrated by these, and I hear what you're saying, and I'm just trying to look at what we think is the better. Do we feel that we're better off this evening closing this and asking for a mitigation plan, or do we want to continue this and let them submit a plan? And if we're going to do that, we want to give them some direction as to what we want for mitigation.
Well, so I just took pretty good notes based on your conversation. I'm going to email it to Greg, so we're all on the same page, and I think you should continue it for revised information, including a mitigation plan. And I think you've given good guidance. You're looking for at least 2 to 1.
3 to 1.
3 to 1. I mean, and you don't want like this going into the 50s. I mean, you might want to consider rebuilding that retaining wall. I mean, I don't know. It's, let's see what the details show. Maybe you can make something that wasn't so good better. I don't know. I'm not
Well,
hearing great
yeah, the only,
feedback here.
right, no, I appreciate that. And the only thing I would just add is that this existing land was all just one big sloping hill down to the water. So like even with the wall there, I know it goes into the 50, but it's not impacting any type of drainage or any type of where the water is going. It's still all grassed area. That wall, inside that wall is completely grass today, and down below it's all still grass. So the existing material that was there is still there today, except the wall that's been put in it to kind of hold that slope up. So like if you guys are saying we need a 2-to-1 or a 3-to-1, come back with a plan. I just would like to get really good guidance if you don't mind.
I think that's a decent point that you're making, Mr. Walsh, is that this was an altered site. And I'm trying to remember, it's so far back. I remember the garage and this discussion, getting rid of the garage and getting that structure away from the resource area, and that this was all altered. It's not like this was a wooded area that was cleared in the hearing that we had before this. That was a relatively small house at the back of the lot, and now there's a huge house.
Well, there was a house on the front, and then there was the big garage in the back.
Right,
that
I
was
understand,
really-
but
yeah,
but
yeah,
along
and
with
two
that,
trees.
but
Yeah,
along
and
with
two
that,
trees.
everything else was all grassed, and it
Correct.
was prepared. It was right down to the edge of the marsh. It wasn't.
Correct.
There wasn't a wooded area or anything that was cleared here. On the
Nothing.
other hand, nor was there a structure. Jen, I'm sorry, can you flip that other one back again?
I really think that you guys should spend some time on map browser and take a look back at the aerials every 6 months as you go through, and you can see what it looked like before
Okay.
spring and fall. It's pretty
Yeah.
clear.
Unfortunately, I'm not.
If you can't do it right now, obviously, but you can maybe later, since we have access to that.
Sure. All right. Well, why don't you, Amy's made a good recommendation. I think we'll just come back with, why don't you guys get a revised plan with the mitigation, and hopefully we can move forward at the next
This one,
hearing.
I think you should go to the 11th.
Okay.
Okay, I'll make a motion to continue 59 Glades Road to September 11th. Is that what we're saying? 9/11.
Correct.
Ooh. Wow, that's Andy.
Yeah, that's around the corner.
All in favor, Doug?
Yes.
And Frank, yes. Okay. 72 and vinyl. On.
Oh, that's gonna be continued.
Yeah, let me get there, okay?
I'm more talking to myself.
On August 7th, 2020, if you want to talk to yourself, mute yourself. On August
I don't
7th,
know how to do that.
2023 at 6 p.m., the Scituate Conservation Commission will hold a wetlands hearing under Chapter 131, Section 40 of the sorry, Penny. The
No, you're
Massachusetts
not,
General
you jerk.
Laws, Section 30700, Town of Scituate Code of Bylaws, regarding the application of the Town of Scituate for an abbreviated notice of resource area delineation and ANRAD on properties located at 72 Ann Vinyl Road, Scituate. Abutters and other interested parties are invited to attend. Information to access the virtual meeting be available posted on the town website. And this applicant has requested a continuance to August 21st.
I make a motion that we continue 72 in Vinyl Road to August 21st.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Doug. All in favor, Andy?
Yes.
Frank, yes, thank you. Agents update. I'm sure it'll be brief.
Amy,
I'm here, just looking for my mute button.
oh,
Okay, so we talked.
Show Penny
about
where it is.
Putting an article in for special town meeting for,
Oh.
upkeep of the parcels.
yeah,
And so we've got a spot. I'm sure there's gonna be a meeting or two coming up leading into this, but so I put in a request for 35.
I know it's good to shoot for the moon. Do you think that's a little high, or can we substantiate that when we go before them?
I think so.
I
Okay.
think you can at least do 20, if not the 35, Frank.
Yeah, no, I think so. And I think that for a capital request, it's like a 5-year request.
All right.
You know, it wouldn't probably last 5 years, but you gotta start somewhere.
Oh, wait a minute. So this is for 5 years, 35? A one-shot deal? Or
No,
35
it's,
a year?
No, it's 35 a year for 5 years.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. Thank
No?
you. Yeah.
no, I don't think so. It's just 35K, and I think the money can be spent over 5 years.
Oh, I get you.
No, that won't do then, Frank,
Why?
because Northern Oaks was 10 grand a year.
I think we
No,
can
no,
get,
but if you spend it sooner, you ask for more.
Oh,
Yeah.
can you, all right, it's just,
I think it's a good start, Penny. I didn't realize how that worked, Amy, but you know, to Doug and Andy, I mean, we're just looking for some way to get some money to do maintenance on our properties, roads, things like that. We keep getting told that we ask for money, and then they say the DPW can do the work, and then the DPW says they don't have money or manpower to do the work. And so kind of hoping that we can get something through where we'll have some funds available to do maintenance to our roadways or make other improvements that we don't have funds for.
well,
Right.
plowing them too.
Like for instance, that one of the topics that Frank was asked to add was concerning a property where we're having some vandalism, I guess you could say. And so like a game camera, none of the funds that we have existing apparently would apply to paying for something like that. So, but I think that money would cover a game camera, you know. be
And just so you know, this isn't going to be like, we're going to ask for it and they're going to give it to us. It's going to be a
Right,
little
no,
bit
it's
of a,
gonna be up for discussion.
it's going
Yeah.
to be a slog to get it, but I think it's worthwhile.
Well,
Well, people prioritize open space and there's a cost for that, so I think you have to start somewhere. I
we'll
say,
drive down the roads after a tough winter and they'll think different.
right,
So,
so I-
Andy or Doug, do either one of you guys have a thought on the amount, or if we should go forward with that?
Great idea to go forward. I haven't seen numbers, so no insight on the amount for me.
Yeah, shoot for the moon.
Okay. All right.
Okay, well, and so we continue to be very busy. There are definitely, you know, the amount of filings have stayed pretty strong with some larger projects on the horizon. Particularly, we have a pretty strong run with certificates of compliance. You can see we've got 6, and this isn't even all of the ones that are in kind of motion right now, but we have 6 on the agenda tonight. But anyway, so I think we should just, since this is a long meeting and it's already 9:20, I think probably just keep this moving and go right into this request to amend for lot 6 Elm Street, which is Greg Morse.
Oh,
Is Greg on for that?
He looks like he's still on, yep.
Oh,
and-
shoot. I'm sorry, I didn't realize we
yeah.
had that. Go ahead.
Sure. 6 Elm Street, this was a stormwater permit, actually through the planning board, but a notice of intent for a single family home. The property, they've come up with a new house footprint And so we revised the plan with the new house footprint. It is a slightly smaller house. We've revised the driveway and the grading to match the new house design. We're hoping you can take it as an amendment instead of an entirely new filing. The limit of work remains exactly the same. The scope of the project is the same. It's just a little bit smaller house, a little bit different footprint.
And I think that you guys probably can. In fact, it's in process with the planning board for stormwater, just re-crunching the numbers. So the next step would be we'd advertise it, probably for the next meeting. Unless that meeting's booked, and then we wouldn't put it on for the 11th. I need to confer with Jen on how our agenda looks for the 21st, but it could be that we're ready for that on the 21st. We'll get it on as soon as we can, Greg.
That would be great.
So if somebody builds something smaller than what they proposed, they still have to amend the plan?
In this case, it's changing the stormwater infiltration as well. So it would be a new site plan that we would be just accepting the new site plan. It's going to be pretty straightforward.
Okay.
But what your question, Doug, is amending it as opposed to administrative review, change.
Yeah.
But you think, Amy, it exceeds what could be done under administrative.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So
Yeah.
I'd say go get it on as soon as you can.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Certificates of compliance.
Okay, so for the certificates of compliance, we are going to issue 138 Gilson was one. I'm not sure if you remember this or not, but it was one that came in front of us, and then we ended up issuing a partial C of C because there was work that was not done, and then the property, passed with some kind of a holdback or whatever, and work was done. And so now we've got the final as-built, which was completed the work that needed to be done that hadn't been done. 145 rear glades is a raised rebuilt septic, and 192 Clap was a pool with some plantings. 9 Collier is an pretty old filing up on Third Cliff, with an as-built of, it was I don't even know what the project was. It was a house with a porch, really old number. So we're gonna issue those. There's 2 that are questionable. 222 Gannett is on the list, but it's not ready. We're still waiting for an as-built. And we've got 23 Jericho, which is it's a property sale. And this is one that I had sent you out an email on, where the engineer had called out some discrepancies in the work that was permitted versus what was built on the ground. And so just needed some feedback from the commission on which direction you wanted to go on that one. So maybe you can have discussion on what you think.
Discussion now, or?
Yes, as I would like to give the current owner purchaser some direction on how
Well,
you
what
want to
did they do
resolve it.
wrong, Amy?
Okay, so on this one. Hold on. It's in the email, but basically there is an 8x14 addition to the back of the garage with a small black block patio and 2 small pads for pool mechanics. There's a lower ground level concrete block patio on the west side of the property.
A lot of concrete.
And then there's a small portion of the concrete patio that extends into the 50-foot no disturb area. And it appears that there's also plantings that are missing as well, which were to be put on the 50. So it was, the orders were for a pool with, the original orders had a pool with like wood decking, because it's on Jericho and flood zone with salt marsh in the back.
Yeah.
And from the mid 2000s, and anyways, and so the pool was built, the decking, I think, must have aged out or whatever, and so within the last few years, the current owner replaced the mahogany decking with you know, new patio and shifted it a little bit around. And then as far as the addition to the garage, I'm not sure when that happened.
Look, I mean, the intrusion
But
is
I
similar.
mean, excuse me?
The intrusion seems similar in scope to the last one we just looked at.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I had some comments from Jen Foley about maybe an after the fact filing. Or just, I mean, we could handle it as a partial CFC with a holdback, which would be similar to what we did with that 138 Gilson. You know what I mean? That would be a typical way we would handle something like that.
When was this? Oh, we have it right here. It looks that the pool is different than what was proposed. But that's probably fine.
Yeah, if you look at
Patios.
the July 25th Webby as built and then the approved plan, you can see just the changes and also the 50-foot BVW line.
Yeah, there's probably a good answer for this. It's probably not an issue. But we'll have to have a clarification. I mean, a question I have needing for clarification is the topography. I think it's a different datum, but if it's not, they cut dirt out of the backyard, which wasn't proposed. But I think it's an issue of a different elevation, different benchmark. So they probably didn't do that, but we have to ask that question.
Was fill added? Is that what you're saying?
It would have been cut instead of fill though. So I doubt if they did that.
Well, because it describes the deck as a raised mahogany deck, and actually the original plan has a fairly insane number of sonnet tubes that this thing was constructed on. It was counted them.
What
out.
was it? What's the address again on that?
23 Jericho, 2, 4, 6, 8.
You have somebody on a hand up
24,
there
like-
too.
32 sonnet tubes were surrounding this pool originally. So this is the current owner. Maybe he can add some.
Okay.
Let me just go.
Can we get
Hi, I'm
Yeah.
Kevin
Kevin,
Vargas,
yeah.
the current owner. Thank you for having us this evening.
welcome?
Yeah, so Kevin, what, there were sonotubes in the ground. Did you cover over them when you installed the pavers?
Correct, we did. And we used 3/4 stone, so everything would be permeable. And then we used dry set pavers, small format pavers, so that way we could mitigate water if it did come up or down. And noting on the answer of the question of the fill, we did not take in any fill and we did not export any fill. The deck that was there originally on the sonotubes was compromised, and one of my children actually fell through one of the slats, and that started the whole process of it falling apart, unfortunately. And our rectification was to try and build it back essentially with a permeable, more bulletproof option.
Is this an in-ground pool or above?
It is semi-recessed, so it does sit up enough. I believe the original order probably had some elevations associated with what at the bottom of it could be. And that pool was the original pool that went in, I believe, back in 2003 from the previous owners. So the pool itself is a fiberglass pool, and it has not been touched or adjusted. The equipment has been there, excuse me, since the original installation, I think back in 2003 as well. The only real adjustment is the compromise of what was there previously to, you know, our fix on it, if you will.
Somebody
Well-
say something.
So I had to look and see
I
what.
maybe lost the connection. Sorry.
I was trying to remember what we're talking about here, but it's a COC you're after.
Yeah. CFC request.
It is a CFC from the previous owners that kind of fell to the wayside, unfortunately. But you know, we're here to rectify, and we want to make everything right.
Yeah, so it obviously didn't come up in the chain of title when this owner purchased it. I don't know, I think it was a family sale or something like that, but
It
anyhow,
did come up
they're-
recently in a
they're
title
ready to-
search. We were closing back on, our intention was to close back on 7/17, and this came up about 7/10 to my knowledge and from my attorney. So we jumped on it, got the engineering put together as quickly as he could, submitted it, and we are hopeful that we are close to compliance. And if we're not, we're certainly here to, you know, rectify any situations. But we would like to close on this house as soon as we could, and we do have another house, my wife and I and our 3 children.
I'm just trying to figure out the real deviation. Can you figure it out, Doug?
Well, yeah, so that that lower patio, you see, that's different. I mean, the significant things are the lower patio and the garage addition weren't there. I mean, around the pool area, it's a different shape, but it's a different shaped pool. And like Amy pointed out, it's not a mahogany deck anymore. Well, it sounds like something pervious though. It's the patio.
Yeah, it's small format pavers. So they do have, any of the joints are permeable. There's no concrete flat work associated with it. So everything was put on 3/4 stone all the way around. And the pavers themselves, I believe the largest is a 10x12, and the smallest is about a 6x6. So all the joints in between, you know, similar to your spacing on your joists, or excuse me, similar to your spacing on your decking as well. So mathematically, I don't know if, you know, linear footage, they're the same, but the intent is exactly the same of having that relief to come up through. I know that a lot of folks have done conditions where they do pour concrete and then do the pavers and set the pavers in some sort of grout or some sort of mortar bed, and that is not the case here. This is fully set on 3/4. Like I said, all the joints are all fully penetratable, and the intent really is to let things flow if they need to.
Yeah. So, and well, thanks. That's good, because that's a good thing. that that certainly makes it easier than having all of that, just all impervious material. And same with the lower patio, I take it, so that it's just a little change in elevation and that's down there. So Frank, I mean, well, everybody, I think that lower patio and it goes into the BVW offset, the 50-foot offset, which usually we're trying not to do. Part of the patio is in there because, but I mean, area wise, it doesn't look like it's a significant difference. It's the shape has that little bubble that goes out into the 50, whereas the original plan didn't show that. They stopped just, right at the 50.
Right.
And then there,
Based
then
on
there's
the
that garage addition.
filing, that was very intentional. Just so you know, they did work hard to maintain that 50 at the time.
Yeah, I'm sure that they drew that right there at that 50-foot line on purpose, and then a couple steps going down. So,
All right, we got to move on this.
yeah, I guess, I mean, what do we do? Like, I mean, we give them the COs.
If it's pavers on crushed stone, would it be easy enough to take it out and revegetate it so it's out of the 50?
Part of it, yeah, down in the lower section, it wouldn't be, it would take a little, just some effort, but it's doable. Our hope would be not to do it. Unfortunately, I say that only because we did have intentions of closing back on 7/17, and right now we're kind of in limbo. And we do have another home that we've purchased as a 9/5 closing date. So that doesn't relieve us of any of the obligations, and we're not trying to do that. Certainly, we're just trying to set our family up for success in the next chapter.
Well, Kevin, is a partial, we don't really like to do it this way. I mean, ideally it would be, we could kind of make, a plan right now, you do it, then we take another look at it and we give you the full CFC because that's really your goal. But I mean, to facilitate closings, we do from time to time issue partial CFCs with an escrow amount to ensure that the work we ask that, to be done is done, and then, you can get your money back, that type of thing. But I think that's a great idea, Andy, to remove the patio and the 50, either that or come up with some kind of a mitigation plan. But there's also plantings that seem to be missing. So I think we could go in that direction.
Or how about the
sale,
So the partial, but regardless, if we give them a partial CFC with some sort of holdback or money escrowed, but are we going to ask them to remove the retaining wall and part of the patio around the existing pool, or just deal with the lower patio? And we're okay with a garage addition. I mean, and then the plantings. I mean, what's the value on all that? And is that what we're in agreement to do?
Well, I guess I mean, I hate for him. It's the whole thing's kind of unfortunate, but I mean, if we're gonna have him do something, I guess if he removes the lower patio, that date gets out of the buffer, I would be okay with leaving the other part around the pool in. It seems that's going to be a problem to remove that part, and it would make it really odd to get around the pool and things. But and then if plantings are needed, you got to revegetate where the lower patio was, so that would be the place that you would put in some plantings. And I mean, I don't really recognize the plantings that are on this plan. It looks like there's some bayberry shrubs and an eastern red cedar tree.
Yeah.
What was there anything else, Amy, that you saw in there? So it was really just a couple things.
Yeah,
Eh,
6
but
or
he-
7 foot eastern red cedar, cluster of 3 bayberry shrubs. And an
Yes,
ornamental tree behind the garage.
Yeah, and that was existing.
Right.
So that was just supposed to stay put. So and it doesn't look like it's there anymore anyways, but it's, but right there is your area to revegetate instead of just throwing down some grass seed, like he could put in something native. And it's, in the buffer area at least. And so I would be happy with that. That's just one person's look at it.
Andy?
Yeah, that makes logical sense to me. Take the lower patio out and get that vegetation.
Penny?
I don't have any idea what we're talking about, because I don't know what you're all looking at, because I don't have anything on my screen,
Gotcha.
so I have no idea.
Oh,
right.
Okay, it was in our email.
Right.
Well, my phone's downstairs.
Ah, gotcha.
There's a plan, Pen.
Thank you. That's gone, that's gone.
All right, so
Yeah, get rid of the lower patio. I'm happy.
to the applicant or the owner, do you think that you'll be able to, if we gave a partial CFC with these things being done,
Most
do you think that you're gonna be able to close, will that fly?
I
You
don't.
can accept them.
I don't know. It would be a question for the buyer, and I'm more than happy to have that discussion. We really, I know
Like he's
the
on the
buyer
phone.
buyer's excited, and I know that we're
Well, we got
looking forward.
somebody else's hand up here, so let's see who that is.
Oh,
If you could state your name and
Yes,
address.
yeah. Hi, how you doing? Yeah, my name is Paul Dardinsky. I'm 32 Barker Road, and yeah, I'm working with Kevin to try to buy his house. Yeah, we're agreeable to that that proposal.
Would it be the lower patio in its entirety, or just back to the 50?
The lower
up to-
patio in its entirety.
yeah, get rid of it.
I think if the lower patio were removed, it would sort of mitigate for the piece of the other one that sticks into the 50. So
Yeah.
take out the
Understood.
lower patio and then do some planting. Is that-
They're gonna need some guidance on the plantings, though. So we want that area planted out with
Yeah.
native.
Yeah, that's something I wish we had ready to go, that we could just say, here's a list of.
I think I can come up with something similar
Okay.
to what we gave the guy
There-
on the hill there.
So
There
So
is
do-
some plantings if where you see the existing garage and the existing dwelling number 23. If you come through and you see the walk on the right and the left side coming in there, there's a total, I believe, of 6 plantings in there. I don't know if those would account towards anything or not, if they're in the limit of work.
Well, Amy, why don't you come up with a list that works for that? But do we want some funds to guarantee this? How do you want to do that?
Right, so then it just comes down to, do we need a full CFC and have him do it like right away? Because I mean, it is work to produce all this for everybody, because you get a partial, then you need to record it. You need to produce money to hold back so that we guarantee the work. Like that's how that would run. Or you just do the work and come back to us and say it's done now, and then we can just issue a full CFC. So I guess that's what is the question.
Well, then maybe these folks should work it out between themselves to guarantee that it gets done, and we're not going to issue we're going to have a partial asking for these things to be done. And then sounds like both the seller and the buyer are aware of it, so they can work out whatever they have to guarantee it gets squared away.
Yeah, no, I can tell that they're both motivated to have this happen. So it probably, we can skip the partial CFC and just have it done. And then we'll get ready to issue the CFC as soon as they can demonstrate that the lower patio's gone and the plants are planted.
Yeah, they have a busy weekend coming up.
All right,
Yeah.
well, Paul's got his hand,
Absolutely.
Paul's got his hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, I have to, I'll leave that to Kevin, but I mean, it's, the partial COC sounds like it could work. I don't know if the, the waiting for the full COC, when would that be issued? That's the only thing, because it's that kind of time is of the essence. That's the, want to get through all of that.
As soon as you get the work done.
So we gotta get going
Yep,
on
that's
this.
fine.
My guess is we should just do a partial.
And then, so it's gonna be a partial with a holdback
Yeah.
of like $5,000 or something like that. Does that sound about right, Frank?
I would say,
Yeah. Okay, we can do that.
all right,
And just so you know, that doesn't happen overnight.
all right, well,
Um,
they can talk with you and Jen
Yeah,
about
we'll get it as
timing,
soon as we can, but okay,
all right?
Yep.
Okay, do we have something to discuss on the other ones? Thank you, Paul,
No.
and
no, I reviewed the other ones. We're
Thank
gonna
you, everyone.
issue
good night.
all of them, but 222 Gannett is still, we're waiting for the as-built. So
Okay.
now we're on to orders. Guys want to vote those?
Sure,
I'll make a motion that we accept the orders of condition as written. I'm gonna do all three together. 29 Surfside Road, 274 Central Ave, and 333 New Driftway as written.
is it 33 Driftway or 333?
It says 33 on my thing.
33.
33.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, that's a
So next one.
motion. Do I have a second?
Second, Andy.
All in favor, Doug?
Yes.
Frank, yes. Okay,
But moving.
anything else?
I really am uncomfortable with you only asking for 35,000 for 5 years. I gave you something from Northern Oaks. And it's approximately close to 10,000 a year to plow and to resurface, make sure the roads are in. All the driveways are done every year. You know? And
Right, so
that-
the 35 is not for 5 years, but it could be 5 years. So you're
Yes,
not
but if-
under
There-
pressure.
it's
what
just-
I'm
she-
trying to-
Send it.
Wait a minute, Frank. Let me finish my conversation. All right, I've got a quote for approximately 10 grand a year, okay? You want to put some motion cameras up. So that cuts into that. That's all I'm saying. I think we should ask for more, at least 40.
Okay, well,
Okay,
we,
I think we're at a point where we can change the number.
okay.
It's
No,
just a
it's
placeholder.
Just,
so-
All right.
I just want you to be able to do some other things
We
too.
don't know that we have it anyways. I mean, this is gonna be a discussion with the
Advisory.
town
committee.
administrator advisory. There's a whole
Yeah.
bunch of stuff. So we're gonna have to come up with some monies, some defensible things, so we don't have to decide that tonight. We'll do the 40. Okay,
Yeah, go ahead.
all right, thank you. I'm not disagreeing, Penny. Just late. Okay. And the only other thing I was gonna say is we had some dumping of trash and stuff at Appleton, and the question was whether we could start to look into some kind of cameras, night cameras, game cams, some sort of stuff, and then post it accordingly.
What kind of dumping, Frank?
It was like a landscaper with leaves and dirt and weeds and
You're
crap,
kidding.
but it also had, soda cans and trash and
Jeez.
and our volunteers picked up some. I picked up a little bit. I went over and turned over the pile, and I think we're just going to be able to push. It's not big enough to really worry about. We can kind of blend it into the leaves and it'll go away. But You know, rather than get into closing the gates and try to monitor all that, the hope is maybe we can find some sort of camera we can shift around from location to location if we have a problem. We've been fortunate. We haven't had a lot of issues.
Yeah,
Few
and
thi-
we could get a picture of the guy stealing it like at that cemetery last week. Yeah,
So
Yeah.
I don't, if we're all in agreement, we'll pursue that a little bit and see. Again, we've been fortunate that we haven't had more. And then, you know, I think some of the volunteers are saying we should really try to look into mowing Appleton commercially. So I don't know, anybody got any thoughts on that? We can try to reach out to some people that have a brush hog kind of piece of equipment and get a price and see what we can do. But to Penny's point, that's the kind of thing we need money for.
Yeah.
Right?
yeah.
And we may need to do that at Appleton too, if we don't have like a thing with a farmer,
Oh, at Border?
at Border rather.
Well, you started off with Appleton, I thought.
Appleton needs to be mowed. The volunteers are mowing around the perimeter of Appleton. They do that on their own, which is really, really nice. They take
Where the
one of
farm
them takes a
is.
tractor up there.
Yeah.
But they're going around the perimeter of the field and keeping it mowed so people can walk without worrying about ticks and stuff. And our volunteers are doing that.
Yeah, yeah.
But we probably want to hire a commercial person with the right kind of equipment to actually mow Appleton Field before it gets out of hand.
Yes.
And the same thing might have to happen at Border Street.
Yeah, and
So-
it's gonna have to happen at Mordecai Lincoln, because
Yes.
Andy and I made the executive decision to let the field go and just have it done once a year.
But we can, maybe at a meeting that we're done a little bit earlier, we could talk a little bit about what's right to do, all that and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm pretty well glassed over here.
Can I just ask you one question, Frank, because this is really bothering me? You as a contractor, you're given a set of plans. You go ahead and you screw up with a set of plans. Does not your customer come back and say, too bad, Mr. Snow, redo it?
I think that to be naive enough to say that it just happened and
I'm tired of this.
well, I get you. So and I think we need to make the repairs painful enough so people, I don't, there's no good answer to that, Penny, other than, you know, and especially
Contractor can't follow the plan.
at 10 o'clock at night. I just,
I know, but it
all right.
keeps happening, that's all.
All right.
Right. I make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Second from Andy. All in favor?
You and Doug.
This has to be unanimous, doesn't it? Or we have
Come
to
on.
stay.
Oh, you want to stay?
Why you wanna stay?
I'm nervous. This is really scary.
Yeah, well, Jen's already shutting the thing off, so good
Yeah.
night.
I'll
Good
say
night,
good
everybody.
Good
Night.
night.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thank you.